Hey, Andrew. Council office. This is
Will, everything working with those cool headphones?
Does that work? That works. Now I can just get out of the way.
Yep.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Will.
Hey, Andrew.
I'm trying to make sure we have a flag for the Pledge of Allegiance.
It looks good.
It took a little bit of doing, but I think we're there.
Yeah. You look
Patriotic.
It's
very. Oh, hey, Lisa.
Hey, Will, it's Mark.
Mark. We are already YouTube Live, and CTV began its broadcast at 5:45.
Okay. Well, I will go mute and I will let you guys have at it.
I'm going to remove that background after the pledge, by the way.
You do you.
Hey, Will, it's Lisa New. I just wanted to check my mic and video there. I'll unmute and go off if you hear me all right.
Yep. Hear you great, Lisa. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Will?
Mr. Jernigan,
Yes,
just wanted to test your audio.
I did, and make sure it was okay.
Sounds good. I'll meet you back. Thank you.
I can leave the meeting and come back, or just stay here?
No, you can stay there. I'm just going to mute you.
Okay, and I'll just lower my hand. Thank you.
Sounds great.
Hello.
Hi, Lynn.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well.
Just wanted to make sure my sound was working. I'll turn myself on mute now. Isn't that what you want us to do?
Yeah, that'd be.
Okay.
Good
Hey,
evening. This is Tommy. Can you hear me?
Yep. Hear your
It's
sound.
Janet. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Nice.
Who is leading the invocation and pledge this evening?
Janet is leading the invocation, and Andrew is doing the pledge.
I guess that's why he has the flag photo up.
Indeed.
He's prepared.
You are correct, Lynn.
See, I'm so smart. Don't let the Andrew.
Hey there, just testing. Can anyone hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Okay, I can't hear you for some reason.
Can you hear me, Charlie?
Will,
Councilman
do you have me muted by any chance?
No, we can hear you.
you.
This is Rob. Can anyone hear me?
We can hear you well.
Thank you.
Hey, can anybody hear me?
Yeah, we hear you, boys.
All right, thanks.
Before we begin, I think I think we just want to see mainly council members and the mayor in the video. So you can go ahead, if you're not a member of council or the mayor, turn your video feed off, please. Council office, this is.
Can you still hear us if we turn that off?
I heard you, boys.
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Okay.
And council members, also, if you're on mute and you just want to speak briefly, you can just press the space bar while you speak. And then when you lift it up, the space bar, you go back on mute, just as another tool.
That's a good tip, Mayor.
Boys, you may want to mute your audio too during the meeting unless you need to speak.
Doing that now.
Will, do we have all council members present?
Do not think so. We are missing Amelia Parker. No.
Would someone, maybe Will, do you expect Ms. Parker to be here, right? As far as you know?
Certainly.
I just text her, Mayor, see if she's able to join in.
I'm going to turn my video off as well.
Hey, Will, how come you're on here twice?
I've got the video feed on my iPad and I'm also on my desktop so I can see all the controls.
Council members, my phone says it's 6 o'clock, and in the interest of starting on time, I'd like to start. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and when Ms. Parker gets here, she's welcome to join when she can, but I'd like to go ahead and get started. So the invocation is being led by, I already forgot.
Testerman.
Janet Testerman, thank you for leading the invocation, followed by the pledge led by Councilman Roberto. Go ahead, please.
Dear Lord, we ask that you be with each of us during these unprecedented times. Please still our hearts and bring hope and courage to all who wait or work in uncertainty. Let us have faith in whatever lies ahead and the strength to endure what cannot be avoided. We ask for health and wholeness, compassion and healing, and please grant us wisdom and guidance as we work to make the right decisions for the people of Knoxville and the future of our city. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the
To the
flag
flag
of the United States of America
and
to the republic
For which it
stands
one
one
nation
nation
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty and
and justice for all.
for all.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, if you could conduct roll call, please.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Here.
Vice Mayor McKenzie.
Here.
Councilwoman Parker.
Here.
Councilwoman Ryder.
Here, sorry.
Councilman Roberto.
Here.
Councilwoman Singh.
Press down your space bar or unmute.
I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am. Councilman Smith,
Here.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Here.
Councilman Thomas,
Here.
all present, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Next item is approval of minutes from March 24th. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Vice Mayor McKenzie, seconded by Councilman Ryder, I think.
Sure. Somebody, two of us.
I think I have to explicitly say that during these Zoom meetings. I can't just, you have to really say the name. So I'll do my best, but raise your hand maybe if you're making the motion so I can see that. Okay, so any motion made and seconded on approval of the minutes? All those in favor, we have to do roll call. So.
Yes, ma'am. Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker,
Aye.
Councilman Ryder,
Yes.
Councilman Roberto,
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas,
Yes.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Okay, the motion is, the minutes are approved. So next item is, are there any items to be withdrawn? Okay. Someone's got some loud birds at their house. Anyhow, are there any items for postponement? Vice Mayor McKenzie.
Yes, Mayor. I'd like to move for item 12B to be postponed until June 2nd.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Vice Mayor McKenzie, seconded by Councilman Roberto. Any discussion? Okay, thank you for this postponement. I look forward to many discussions between now and then. Now, please, Mr. Johnson, please take a roll call vote.
Actually, Mayor, we did have one person signed up to speak on this. If council wanted to hear from him now, he may also be available to speak at public forum at the end of the meeting.
Council members, would you like to hear this person speak now or wait?
I wouldn't mind hearing him now.
Okay, that sounds good. And whoever's operating the clock, I mean, I can do it myself here on my phone. Or someone,
Okay.
I'll just do it on my phone.
Okay, we have Philip Reyes. I will allow him to speak and unmute him. And
Okay. Mr. Reyes, thank you for being here. I can't see you, but can you say something so we know that you're here?
Yes, ma'am. Can you all hear me?
Yeah. Well, if you could just go ahead and start by saying your name and address for the record, and you have up to 5 minutes to speak.
This is Philip Reyes, and I live at 3400 Fountain Park here in Knoxville, Tennessee. And just wanted to discuss, or what I wanted to talk about was the postponement. And I had prepared something, and I was not prepared for the June 2nd date, but I had wanted to say, Mayor Kincannon, City Council members, thank you all for allowing me to speak. I come wholeheartedly requesting each one of you to consider postponing the ordinance, which you already have. But I would like to see it postponed until our social distancing. I just don't think that we have enough with what's going on, that until the social distancing restrictions are eased, I'm unsure if even the June timeframe, I know it gives us plenty of time to conduct meetings, but we can't get together and sit down and do this. And I think there are restrictions of virtual meetings, and just like what we're seeing here, it's been a contentious debate, and I don't think virtual meetings are a good place for this. And I feel that we need more work groups, and we need more discussion that's going to ultimately affect employees. I don't want to talk about or debate what's at hand. I just think we need to look at those guidelines, because today we got more guidelines as a city employee. Now we need to wear masks and different things. And I mean, there's just a whole lot of things our employees are worried about. And this, if we can just move it a little further down the road, which I applaud, the June the 2nd is a good date to look at, but we may have to go more. And I'm hoping this council is open and the mayor's open for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Are there any other people signed up to speak about this postponement?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Then please take a roll call vote. And this is, you're voting on the postponement June 2nd.
Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker,
Yes.
Councilwoman Ryder,
Yes.
Councilman Roberto,
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas, Councilman Thomas,
You have to hold the space bar down. Hold the space bar down.
Yes, sorry.
thank you. Councilwoman Fugit,
Yes.
that was 9 in favor, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other items for, so the motion is postponed till June 2nd. Are there any other items for postponement? Okay, seeing none, any items requested to be added?
Mayor, I think Councilperson Singh had something she wanted to add.
I just unmuted myself. We can finish with this, but I wanted you to, if you wouldn't mind, just address the HR issue a bit. Just a very general idea of what it is. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think we really need to begin the discussion. Maybe here is the place. Just the beginning of it.
Well, Councilwoman Singh, I agree that we do need a lot more discussion, but since it's already been postponed and there's a council workshop scheduled for next Thursday, and we have a pretty full agenda, I would prefer to save the substantive discussion for next week's council workshop.
That's fine.
Just in the interest of saving our energy for the rest of the agenda. Okay. Are there any items that people would like to add by motion? Okay. How about, is there a consent agenda? Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Vice Mayor McKenzie, seconded by Councilwoman Singh. Please take a roll call vote. Or did you have a question, comment, anybody? No. Please take a roll call vote. Mr. Johnson.
Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker,
If you hold the space bar down, we can hear you.
Yes.
Councilwoman Ryder,
Yes.
Councilman Roberto,
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Okay, yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas,
Yes.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Yes.
It's 9 in favor, ma'am.
Okay. Moving on to the mayor's report. First, I want to thank council members, the recorder's office, the information systems team, and CTV for making it possible to meet electronically. And this is our second time doing this, and I think it's getting a little smoother each time. There were a few technical limitations at first meeting, and I think we are resolving those. We put out an update and instructions last week on the city website and on social media for how people could address city council tonight. So for those who haven't heard, to speak at future meetings until we're able to meet face-to-face, and we don't know when those restrictions will change, please contact City Recorder's Office by 5 p.m. on meeting days. And Will Johnson and his team will make sure to take your contact information and allow you to speak during the meeting via Zoom, just the way Mr. Reyes just did. This is a temporary, good faith effort to balance the need for transparency and engagement while also practicing social distancing recommended by health officials. This also adheres to the Open Meetings Act, which has been amended by Governor Lee, recognizing the COVID-19 threat. So for the first time ever in the history of the state, electronic meetings of city council and other legislative bodies are allowed. Friday, April 10th is a city holiday and city offices will be closed. Just just as a FYI, the city's contractor for garbage and recyclables pickup, Waste Connections, will be running its normal routes. Downtown trash and recyclables will be picked up the following regular schedules over this Easter weekend. And the 5 recycling drop-off centers will be open Friday, April 10th, but the solid waste facility on Elm Street will be closed on Friday. And starting this month, just on the solid waste front, the solid waste facility is going to be closed every Saturday, and starting Thursday, April 9th, the household hazardous waste drop-off side of the transfer station will be closed. And both of these are measures to slow the spread of COVID-19. Okay. So now I want to recognize a few people before we get on to some topics related to COVID-19. I want to recognize several people who are making a huge difference, have made a huge difference, or are continuing to make a huge difference in our city. First of all, Bill Lyons retired last Friday after serving under 4 different mayors. We thank him for his lasting impact on the city and all who live and work here. He's just done a great job, and I really appreciate his willingness to help me as I transition to being mayor these first 3 months or so. So thank you, Bill Lyons. Maybe you're watching. If so, hello and thank you. I also wanted to announce and thank Clarence Vaughn has been executive director of Park since 2016. And he is leaving to become the director of diversity at University of Tennessee Haslam College of Business. Clarence, if you are watching, thank you for your countless hours of work to make sure citizens of our community have had a voice in police matters. This is a great opportunity for him. I would have been happy to have him stay on as Park Executive Director, but it was an opportunity that he wanted to pursue, and I congratulate him and wanted to let council members know that I've appointed Ola Blackman McBride to serve as interim park director, and the position is posted and interested candidates should apply. The information's on the city website, and the applications are going to be accepted through April 13th. So that's the park director open position. I also have happy news as I've appointed Mark Parker to serve as the city's new chief technology officer. You all know Mark. He's the reason we have Zoom here today, and he's been serving in the acting role and has worked for the city through information services for many years and has been instrumental in keeping the city running during this pandemic. But I was really impressed with his work even before the pandemic, and I think he's going to be a great chief technology officer for us. So thank you and congratulations to Mark Parker. I also wanted to mention that, as you guys know, Jim Hagerman retired at the end of March, or towards the end of March, and I've named Steve King as the acting director of city engineering. And I want to thank Steve for his willingness to step forward as an interim acting director during this critical time. He's obviously had a lot of experience and is going to keep engineering department moving forward smoothly until I appoint a permanent director for engineering. I also, in sad news, wanted to take a moment to honor Matt Goodwin. Conrad Matt Goodwin was serving his second term as commissioner on the Knoxville Planning Commission. He was also president of Town Hall East Neighborhood Association and involved in many other organizations in our community. Mac is a friend of mine and my family's too. He and his wife, Lydia, introduced us to the country of Slovenia and was one of the reasons we ended up spending a year over there. And he's just a wonderful person and a great community servant. So he passed away a few days ago after a battle with cancer, and he will be greatly missed. Okay, so I have a couple things about COVID-19. First, I want to say a huge thank you to all our police, fire, and all our first responders. They are on the front lines every day. And as a small token of our appreciation, we have the pedestrian bridge by the convention center lit up in red, white, and blue to honor all of your sacrifices. So that started about a week ago and is going to just stay lit up red, white, and blue until this pandemic subsides is the plan. And hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later. Speaking of the pandemic, it changes every day. We at the city, and we're working with our community partners and doing everything we can to protect our families and our employees to slow down the spread. Just in the past week and a half, as you know, Governor Lee issued a safer at home order, which I was glad to see. He was in Knoxville last Friday. And I got to meet with him, and the main message was that we should be preparing for a surge and that their support our preparations, but we're sort of responsible at the local level for coordinating that response. So the very next day, we convened a surge task force, and that is being led by Dr. Keith Gray. He's with UT Medical Center, but he's been nominated and appointed by all of the area hospitals to serve as their representative, because hospital capacity and response and support is a big part of dealing with the surge. Also, of course, our partners with the Knox County Health Department are on the task force. Colin Ickes of KEMA, David Brace and Stephanie Welch from the city, and some people from Knox County are on there too. And I'm also really, one of the things that has been hard to deal with is that all the models are either national models or statewide models. And we want to deal with what's on the ground here in our East Tennessee, Knoxville, Knox County region. So luckily we have so many talented people at the University of Tennessee with a lot of experience in epidemiology, in making very complex math models of biological systems. And if you go to the Howard Baker Center website, you can see some of their work. And sometime in the near future, they're going to be publishing a model that projects the COVID surge here in our immediate area. And that will help us make better decisions based on what the expected surge is, when it's going to be, how big it's going to be, whether we need to open up an alternate care facility, and how many, all those things. So they're going to factor in our hospital capacity, our pre-existing sort of health situations, in other words, how vulnerable our population is, all those things that are unique to our region, not the state as a whole and not the country as a whole. So I'm looking forward to seeing that model. Earlier, my executive order took effect April 1st. That was to just make sure that we could incorporate the Knox County Health Department's Safer at Home order, and that by issuing that executive order, it allowed our city employees to help with enforcement. So Peter Ahrens and other people have formed an enforcement group that works with Ronnie Neese and other people at the health department. And we have people with our codes enforcement helping out, and our fire inspections office, and our Parks and Rec people. And just so you know, the goal of enforcement is to get people to practice the social distancing and follow the Safer at Home order. It's not to issue citations, and we have not issued a single citation. So the first order of business is to inform people about the Safer at Home order, why it's so important, and then ask them to comply. And usually that's all it takes. And so far, like I said, we haven't issued a single citation. We are asking people, if you have concerns about the order or are worried about someone who's not complying, to call 311 and we will investigate. And we're also being proactive and particularly in our parks and whatnot, and trying to make sure that people are following the order. But call 311 if it's weekends or evenings. You can email 311 at 311office@knoxvilletn.gov. Last, testing. Testing's a big deal. Last Friday and Saturday, the health department partnered with the city and Kroger to offer drive-through COVID-19 tests. 262 tests were administered. So that was a good thing. And for the most part though, people are being told to go to their own personal doctors to seek and get tested. And that's moving forward in that way. I think supplies are hard to come by, but I know the health department and the private entities are doing the best they can to test people, particularly people who are already showing symptoms. Chip Berry has done a great job with coordinating some collections of PPE for our first responders at Chilhowie Park last week. They collected 315 N95 masks, 103 boxes of gloves, 150 boxes of surgical masks, and 75 containers of wipes. And so going forward, we are asking people to drop off any donations of unused commercial quality PPE, personal protective equipment, they can bring through TEMA at the Armory on Sutherland Avenue, not far from West High School. So if you still have PPE, unused PPE that you can donate, that's the place to take it. Working with community partners, we have funded and started the creation of a new shelter called the Guest House. This is for people experiencing homelessness who've been tested for COVID-19. The Guest House opened this week and can house up to 18 people. As of this morning, there were 8 people at the shelter. Of those, 7 have COVID-19 tests pending and 1 has tested positive. Today, I also allocated $100,000 in emergency funding to the CAC to support their Homeward Bound program to help residents fill acute and immediate resource gaps in order to remain in housing and access shelter. This initial funding can be supplemented by additional funding from the city as we continue to navigate the pandemic. So that's people who are on the verge of being homeless to help them stay in whatever their housing situation is. So I'm really pleased that we could give that money to CAC. As you know, on your agenda tonight, I'm also recommending $700,000 in emergency funding for Zoo Knoxville. The zoo garners 3/4 of its operating revenue from ticket sales and memberships, and it's losing more than $20,000 a day since the pandemic forced it to close. And we'll talk about that more when we get to that agenda item. Dozens of partners are coordinating through the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, to make sure people who need it can connect with food resources. And we're encouraging everyone to call 211 if you need help or you know someone who's hungry. Speaking of which, the United Way has launched the COVID-19 Community Response Fund to assist. So I asked Matt Ryerson to attend this meeting tonight. He's the president and CEO of the United Way Greater Knoxville. Mr. Ryerson, are you, I see, yeah, there you are, you're unmuted. If you could just share with the council a little bit about what United Way is doing, and then maybe see if council members have any questions.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay, Mayor Kincannon?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Kincannon. Thank you, council members, for the opportunity to give a quick report for you all. I hope what I have to share today is a bit of good news in the midst of this crisis. About a week and a half ago, we did launch, as the mayor mentioned, the COVID-19 Response Fund in an effort to help address, as the mayor has already outlined, the challenges that so many nonprofits are confronted with a perfect storm of increased needs, increased expenses, and decreased revenue through either programming fees or fundraising events. So our effort at the United Way was to try and supplement their current budgets with an injection around the COVID-19 Response Fund, especially for programs that are directly addressing and helping families in particular that are impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. As of tonight, we have in-house $152,302 that's been raised. We also have earlier this week committed an additional $55,000 for what we think is a grand total of $207,302. We feel really good about that. We already put out requests for proposals from nonprofit partners. The sum total of all of those requests was $306,000. We're about 2/3 of the way to that initial need. We actually were able to allocate $57,500 of those dollars on Monday. So that money will be injected right back into the nonprofit community. We typically do a little bit more, a little bit slower process in our allocations traditionally at the United Way as most grant makers, but we felt a sense of urgency around this crisis. So we wanted to turn that around as quickly as possible. And just want to applaud our volunteers and so many of our donors that really injected into that fund and got that money flowing. Phase 2 is actually already on its way, and we hope to inject an additional $50,000 into the community next week. And we'll probably see a timeline consistent with that. As we know, this crisis is not over. And in fact, as the mayor highlighted, we expect a surge. And so we want to be able to be responsive not only to the needs today of our nonprofit partners, but the needs that we anticipate in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Ryerson. Council members, does anyone have a question for Mr. Ryerson about the United Way's role in helping coordinate support for our nonprofits and just our most vulnerable populations.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions.
Okay.
This is Amelia. Hi, Matt. How are you?
Not bad. How are you tonight?
I'm good. Thanks for being on the call, and thanks for all the work that you're doing. One clarifying question, you said the first phase of grants were allocated yesterday. Did you say an amount on that?
Yeah, that was $57,500. Did you get that amount?
No, sorry, it broke up just a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry, $57,500. We knew we were able to inject that immediately just because we had that in-house at the time we announced it. So that was where we landed on that number.
So it seems like things are a little tight because I looked into the application process and it seems like that application closed at the end of March or sometime around the end of March. So, and the second phase that you're talking about will only review applications that came in during that first round in March. So anyone who's developed a need since that application deadline has passed, I'm assuming doesn't have an opportunity to apply to this fund?
Well, you're correct. In phase 1 and phase 2, we're trying to address the immediate needs related to the crisis as they've developed in nonprofits that are directly working with and expanding services for families. The committee that oversees that's already decided in phase 3 and phase 4, which we know at this point we will have. They will open that back up for nonprofit partners that have develop new needs. And that's one of the reasons we're trying to push this out on a timeline. We don't want to inject it all immediately because we know that there will be more needs developing as we move forward.
Okay. And so as of today, you all have raised about 200,000. You hope by next week you'll have allocated around 100,000 of that. But the need expressed from applicants as of, towards the end of March is around 300,000. So about 100,000 gap to meet the needs of the requests that you've already received.
Correct.
Okay. And another question. I've often worked with grassroots organizations. We run smaller budgets. We do not have the money to hire professional audits. So we haven't been able to participate in the United Way program. So I'm wondering, are we leaving out a lot of grassroots groups who are providing these direct services, or is there a way that your work is also interacting with theirs?
Yeah, that's a great question, Councilmember Parker. I appreciate that. Yeah, we have relieved some of the traditional needs related to United Way partnership. And so it's much broader. We still have an accountability to our make sure we're being good stewards over those dollars. We don't actually require, for example, an audit, a financial review is enough. And we are approaching and partnering with a grassroots organizations. So it's a very different, half of the organizations are not current United Way partners.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Parker. Any other questions for Mr. Ryerson? All right. Oh yeah, Ms. Ryder. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Ryerson, if there's any information, I don't recall in this conversation if you've shared how people can make contributions for those who still want to donate. Could we review that for everyone? And we could also share that with our networks, please.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. That's key, right? So the easiest way is just to go to our website, uwgk.org, and there's a pop-up link that just goes directly to the COVID-19 Response Fund. Anybody in the community can give. We're really pleased. Our local networks, the local television stations have done a joint PSA, and they'll be running those this week. I believe they started tonight. And so they'll be pushing people towards that as well. So we appreciate that. Obviously, as the council member had brought up, we are not to our goal and we're not to what we anticipate the need will be. So we continue to actively pursue both individual and corporate donors to this fund to really support the nonprofit community during this time. So again, thank you for bringing that up, Councilmember Ryder.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Smith?
Yeah, just one question, Matt. This is Tommy Smith. For social services, food, shelter related questions, most folks should still call 211. Is that the right point of contact for those needs, those individual needs?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up as well. You guys should go to work for me. You're doing a great job. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody that is in the community tonight and finds themselves in a challenge or anticipating a challenge, whether it's rent, utilities, food, whatever their social situation is, 211 is the best resource. Russ Jensen and his team over at 211 are actively pursuing the most up-to-date information. We are actively working with the EOC and the 4 social service branches, the homeless branch, the food instability branch, senior services and youth services. And we are pushing all of those nonprofit partners to keep 211 abreast of every expansion, change, closure. So 211 is the best resource for anybody looking for help.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Ryerson? Thank you so much for all you're doing for our community. And thanks for participating in this meeting tonight. Just to summarize, if you have an individual concern about food or rent, call 211. If you want to donate to the United Way, which is helping a lot of organizations help meet those needs, go to www.uwgk.org and you can donate online and the money will be put to good use. If you have a question about enforcement or the Safer at Home order, call 311. And most importantly, if you are worried about your neighbor, check in on them, give them a call. There are a lot of vulnerable people, seniors and other people that need your help. So there are organizations that can do that, but neighbors helping neighbors can also do that too. So just wanted to commend everybody for stepping up and doing what we can to help each other through this crisis. We will get through this, and I'm pleased that the city's, being a good partner in all this and working together with great organizations like the United Way. So that concludes my report. Are there any reports of council members? Ms. Fugit. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. At our last meeting 2 weeks ago, there was discussion about asking about SBA loans to be forgiven, about us doing a resolution to that effect. I met with, talked to our attorney, Rob Frost, but as many of you know, since that time, the SBA guidelines have come out. Paycheck protection loan is 2.5 months worth of payroll, which is forgiven if you keep people on the payroll through the end of June, which was one of the big concerns small businesses had. How can I get money if I'm going to have to pay it back? So I did not bring forward a resolution because our concerns have been met. The other thing I would encourage people is that applications are still being taken. Talk to your bank, please apply. There's one round of funding. I suspect there will be another round of funding from the federal government. And also, it is my understanding that we all qualify for the emergency declaration disaster loans from SBA, which is a different type of loan. It does have to be paid back, but it has a 30-year amortization. So the payment will not be catastrophic to someone, and it's deferred for a year. So anybody who's concerned, please reach out. If you want the disaster recovery loan, you go straight to the SBA website. If you want the paycheck protection loan, you go to a bank. That is all, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Fugit. Mr. Thomas, did you have a report?
Yes, just briefly. And I simply wanted to clarify during these times the best way to get in touch with me, as we're not being able to attend meetings, public meetings, as we normally do. And it's simply just go to the City Council website, use that telephone number, use that email address. I know some people are trying to maybe contact me through social media or by posting things, and it's quite tenuous that I would even see that post. So if you really want to get in touch with me, just simply give me a call, email me. I've got a fairly systematic way of responding. If I don't get back with you immediately, I will get back with you. If for some reason you don't hear from me in a while, simply try me again. But I really try to stay in contact with my constituents, and I don't intend to lower the bar during these times. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Any other reports from council members?
I had one.
Ms. Parker. Go ahead.
I wanted to thank the mayor and your administration for developing the response to the resolution passed by City Council asking that the city evaluate our ability and the need for emergency funding for certain services, and also for any sort of relief we can provide our residents when it comes to city fees, taxes, etc. And so I just wanted to use this moment to discuss it briefly, because that's how we get things on the agenda, right? Is discuss it during these moments. And also to ask how this will be available for the public. Is this a part of our packet now? Or
you mean the memo that was sent to you by email earlier today?
Yeah.
We could, post it on the city website or something if you'd like. I don't, we are open to sharing that. You guys can send it out via email to people that you have emails to. It's sort of long. I mean, but that's because we're doing a lot of things, and we were answering a lot of questions. So first, thanks to Aaron Gill for working on assembling all those answers, and also to obviously lots of members of the city staff for doing those responses we've done to date. It's been a very busy but productive time, and a lot of people working together to make that happen. So you have the email, you have the document. Feel free to share that. We could post it to the city website or post it on city social media as well. If a dense document like that is not so conducive to social media, but if someone really wants to read it, they could read it that way.
Sure. I was just wondering if I referenced it at a later point, if folks would be able to find it. But I just, one issue that I wanted to bring up is our support for individuals experiencing homelessness. And I wanted to see if there was any additional plans being developed, because I had a couple of concerns. One is, and also, since the city's receiving updates from the county, perhaps there's an update from the county that can be shared during this time too. But I'm happy to see this effort that has moved forward, opening the guest house for those experiencing symptoms or testing positive. I do want to clarify that we are separating those populations in that space, and we're hopefully able to isolate those who have tested. Yes. That's good. And then also, this need for, additional shelter, additional individual shelter. I know there had been discussion, and maybe that was just for those experiencing symptoms within the county of using some hotel rooms for homeless sheltering in place. Are those conversations continuing? Or
my understanding is that, well, I'm going to let Stephanie Welch address this. She's probably more up to speed on this. Stephanie, could you speak to this, please?
Can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So the county does have a protocol already in place for housing individuals who don't have shelter in hotel rooms when they need to be quarantined. However, that protocol is really much more relevant in a scenario where there are like 1 or 2 people, let's say it's tuberculosis, or I think in the past they've housed people who have syphilis in quarantine. This is an unprecedented scenario that we're facing, and so the county had 20 hotel rooms, I believe, set up, and quickly realized that folks would just, there was no social service support available through that situation, and came to the city and asked us for help. We've been partnering directly with the county. We're in conversations with the health department every day. They've helped to identify medical support. The Metro Drug Coalition has also been coordinating with the county to make sure that we're providing addiction support through the shelter. And I think right now, the scenario that we're in is we've started conversations with the county about the potential need to expand for quarantine, both for people who are tested and waiting for results and for those who test positive. We have more than 18 beds of capacity, and I can let Bruce Spangler address this. But we've already started the conversations with the county about how to continue partnering with them if and when we need to expand to have additional beds. Hotel is right now not the right answer based on the needs of the population that we're serving. Does that help?
It does. I was just curious if Bruce wanted to speak to, what is that solution if it's not the hotel rooms?
Councilmember Parker, I'd be glad to, and Mayor. What we have found is that with the guest house, that there needs to be a level of social support, because in the hotels, there's not that level of services as well as engagement with folks. So at the guest house, we have 2 people who are on staff 24/7. We also have security. We also have found that the vast majority of our guests are struggling with addiction disorders and or co-occurring. So for everybody that comes in, we're doing the substance abuse assessments to see the best way that we can help them, not only just right now, but also in the future. As you know, that folks who are experiencing homelessness have a variety of needs. And so the guest house has just become one point, especially for folks who have substance abuse, because a lot of folks with that disorder, it's difficult for them to have stayed in the hotel without the personnel to kind of help direct and also to help supplement some of their needs. But you had raised the question earlier about we do segregate folks who have tested positive versus those who have tested negative. In terms of the volume, of course, we've only been open for the past 2 days. Yesterday, we had 9 admissions. And at the end of the day, we still had 8 guests. Today, we only had 3 admissions with 7 people who were discharged with negative test results. So at the end of the day at 5 p.m., we had 4 guests with us. So it's kind of hard to tell about the numbers. I hope that helps.
That does help. And let me ask you this, Bruce.
Yes, ma'am.
Also in the report, there was an update that KPD is not going to break up the homeless camps in the city.
That's correct.
Does your team have capacity to now service and check on those camps and help them make sure they have the supplies they need?
Yes, our street outreach workers are doing that. Also, CAC has 2 workers as well. We don't go to camps that often. We've done a lot of work under the safe space, but I do know that for the campers, there has just been a lot of information to give them, to remind them about social distancing anywhere from 6 to 12 feet. But we're trying to get the information out to them. Yes, ma'am.
So information, but not necessarily food delivery and that type of stuff.
Those connections are made. I could not tell you with great detail how they are. A lot of them are still coming to the mission to eat, I'm sure. So a lot of folks will actually sleep at the camp and then venture out during the day.
Ms. Parker, so you brought up an important thing that I think we're trying to get the message out. There are a lot of people who want to help neighbors who are homeless, particularly now, maybe more than ever. And sometimes they bring food down to the safe space or to the parking lots nearby. And that actually poses a threat to people who are homeless, because it exposes them, the people who are bringing that food are at higher risk of having coronavirus and bringing it to the people they're trying to help. So we're asking people to bring donations like that to other providers to distribute, or to food pantries or that sort of thing. So there's no shortage of need for food that also serves our homeless neighbors. So and the direct contact like that is exactly what we're trying to minimize. So we're really encouraging generous people and organizations to give through VMC, CARM, Salvation Army, or other entities that provide food and meals to homeless people, rather than direct delivery like that. So just a side note.
I think it's a really important point that you brought up, because I think some of the concern that I've heard in the community is that these organizations and services exist because they've been filling a need that wasn't being met by these other agencies. And so that need has only grown during this pandemic. And I'm concerned that we're, leaving out parts of the population, whether it's folks who, have been banned from certain areas, or whoever it might be, and they're not getting the support that they need during this time, because they don't get services from the major agencies.
Well, Ms. Parker, that's a really big, challenging question. And I think, we are probably not going to solve homelessness in the midst of the pandemic. I do obviously support the housing first approach. And I think this pandemic and our response to it underscores the need to do that. And I know, Mr. Spangler and others are working very hard on that, and we need to keep working on it, and more permanent supportive housing and more affordable housing of other kinds too. So, but I don't think we're gonna be able to end homelessness.
Well,
during this time.
Questions are not to try to end homelessness in this moment. That would take many, many more resources than what I've proposed, but there are lots of guidelines out there. I shared these protocols, with the city a month ago now, when it comes to how to help prevent spread among our unsheltered population. One of those is to have readily available hand washing stations. And that was another concern of mine, that we only have this one area that we're telling folks that they can wash their hands during this pandemic, located downtown. And when we have folks, it makes sense that they would start gathering there and then start camping there. And that is one encampment that I was told was broken up last Friday. And so there, we got to get our policies kind of in order. If we're pushing everyone, all of this vulnerable population, to this one central point, it makes sense that they would want to, camp there, because that's where they're feeling safe. If we want to encourage folks to spread out and practice social distancing, then we have to make sure that they have the resources where they are, and that they don't have to come into downtown just to wash their hands at a public facility. Those are some of the concerns. Not trying to solve homelessness, but just trying to put some things in place that enable all of our residents, to move through and face this pandemic with a sense of dignity, and shutting down our public restrooms is going to make it difficult for a lot of folks in our city. And, our need to kind of keep a positive, upbeat conversation about what's happening. I kind of understand it, but I would rather us have that really difficult conversation of how lacking, in resources we are right now, but how hard we are working to meet the needs that are there. And that's what's concerning me.
Well, I share your concern. We are looking for more resources to help our homeless neighbors, as well as our first responders, as well as our people in the medical field. There's a scramble for resources and a lot of different needs for our seniors, for our kids, for food, and homeless people are among the most vulnerable, and we are working to address their needs as best we can, and it's an ongoing process. And these are good reminders that we can keep working on those things. That's all I can say at this point. I agree with you, but we're doing the best we can to help with these resources with a lot of vulnerable populations. So, do you have any other questions? Or actually, this is reports. Do you have any other reports or comments? Any other?
Well, I'll wrap up my section so others can comment. I encourage the city to value the role that our grassroots organizations are playing at the moment and play every day in this city, and reaching out to those who aren't reached by these major service organizations. And let's find a way to give them the support and funding that they need. One way that I've seen that happen is 202 funds that the city council manages. If we had access to more of those funds, we might be able to move some of that funding to some of those agencies that are providing that direct outreach and support, who've already built relationships in the homeless community and can make sure on a regular basis that folks are getting the services that they need. And I would encourage us to review, our policies around access to hand washing facilities and whether this one place is enough. I'll conclude there.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments? Ms. Ryder?
Yeah, I have a question if Mr. Spangler is still, or Dr. Spangler is still with us. I know I've contacted and talked to some of your staff that they're going out and communicating with folks in camps and letting them know what is going on, making them aware. And so this is kind of a two-part, maybe service providers, but also the city. Are we posting signage in areas like the area under the bridge, just to kind of make folks aware of what's going on?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. There's been a lot of information being handed out there, as well as postings on the bathrooms and those kinds of things.
So there's like permanent messaging versus just verbal. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Ryder. Any other? Yeah, Ms. Singh.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about the United Way funds. If a small grassroots organization wants to apply for funds through them, they just need to get a fiscal agent, and Community Shares is willing to work with most anybody. And then they can apply for the funds.
All right.
And the financial review. You don't have to have an audit, but I believe you have to have the financial review. And so you have to have time to hire someone, have that review done, submit it by the next deadline.
Okay. Any other reports from council members? Seeing none, let's move on to item 8.
Mayor.
Oh,
Me,
sorry,
Mayor.
Vice Mayor.
No worries. Thank you. I also wanted to add on to what Council Member Parker brought up, because the CDC actually does have preventive measures guidelines for homeless and for encampments. And so I would like for I know there's an emergency response team that we have. We have another team that's looking into homelessness. So I do share concerns about them not having adequate abilities to be able to sanitize their hands, wash their hands. I don't know if there are any groups that are providing any type of masks for folks that are out there that, as it relates to social distancing, and and now that the new guidelines say that it could actually be spread through just talking. to each other. So encampments of 10 or more people, I would like for us to maybe have a follow-up communication or some type of something back from that group, even if it's just maybe we need to pull together a meeting just to talk a little bit more about this particular, the encampment of homeless people this week, because I definitely share the concerns about their ability for sanitation at this point.
I know Mike Dunthorne is participating in that task force, and I'll ask him to bring that up and see what kind of solutions they propose as a group.
Okay, thank you. In addition, I also want to just remind anyone that's listening that the Tennessee Department of Human Services does have emergency TANF cash assistance funds available for families that qualify for that. You can go to their website or you can call 866-311-4287 to apply or ask questions to see if you qualify for emergency cash assistance. I do know that one of the requirements is that you must have children that live in your home. Also, I do want to thank the Knox County Health Department along with Kroger Health. I know, Mary, you've already mentioned this, for hosting the drive-through coronavirus testing last Friday and Saturday, and also Zoo Knoxville for helping with the space there, which made it very convenient for people to be able to drive through and not have to get out of their cars. Also want to encourage everyone to please call and check on seniors, call and check on folks that you know struggle with maybe mental health issues or substance abuse issues that are recovering. They may not have access to get to AA or NA meetings, so please just continue to check in on people. Also, just want to share the National Suicide Lifeline number with anyone that may be listening. So you have it available if you need to access them or know someone you need to share this number with. It is 800-273-8255. Want to encourage everyone to please take care of themselves on these really pretty days. I encourage you to get out and enjoy the sunshine. Social distancing does not mean social isolation. We can still call, we can still communicate via texting and Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, all of those social media outlets. And lastly, I still want to keep the Census 2020 on the forefront of everyone's minds to please participate and complete the census. You can do that online if you have not already turned in your census form. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Ms. Singh.
Thank you. I wanted to bring up an issue. A few different people have called me about the essential workers that are out there. A lot of employers are not giving them what they need, a mask, a safe space to work in. So that's a big concern. The other one is the social gatherings. I went by a party of 75, 100 people this weekend, just hanging out. Yeah. And 311 is what I contacted. And eventually, I think now the message has changed so that people know how to get in touch with them on the weekend. But yeah, I contacted them and I think they sent out a Parks and Rec person to speak to them. But I'm really concerned about the employers. Some of them are pretty large companies that are just refusing to give the employees what they need.
Yeah, that's a big challenge. And we do have some enforcement plans in place for like the large gatherings and stuff, but you know, dealing directly with employers is not something that we can directly address. I think, you know, people can go through TOSHA and that sort of thing, but I mean, that's not going to get immediate responses. So I'm not sure. We can try to lead by example as an employer, and we can try to encourage people. Now that the CDC has issued better guidelines on that, you know, that might help. But you know, we need to, as a community, work on that and try to set a good example, and then also get the message out like you're doing right now and saying, you know, please take health first and foremost in mind, because also a lot of the employers are rightfully concerned about the economic impact, but all the research I've shown is that the more you follow like the safer at home orders, the faster your economy bounces back afterwards, because people are healthier and the pandemic restrictions subside sooner. So, but it's, you know, that's hard to convince people when they are thinking about bills and whatnot that the very next month, not 6 months down the road. But yeah, it's really difficult to enforce that. The city really doesn't have any enforcement authority to call up employers and say, you must provide masks. You know, it's not the law. It's not a law in the city. It's not a law in the state or federal government. So it's just what's advised. And, you know, I'm not sure what kind of things we can do except urging people. Go ahead. Sorry.
I know that in some executive orders, they include what the rules are about spacing and what the needs are. And maybe if it's in an executive order, then maybe the health department would be able to go out there and at least say, this is what you need to be doing.
Well, here's the thing is the health department, we adopted their things because they are the ones who have, you know, the most direct authority over pandemics. And so that's why when I did the executive order for the city, I adopted their order word for word. So we'd be on the same page. And they are enforcing, obviously throughout the, you know, they're enforcing the stuff in restaurants and food in particular. But if I could pass orders left and right and the health department's not gonna enforce them, like they're not city, you know, they're not an agency of the city. They serve us, they are our health department, but they won't be responsive to executive orders that aren't consistent with their own authority. Ms. Fugit.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to say, I will say it may not be that an employer does not want to get stuff for somebody. Everybody is having a hard time. There isn't hand sanitizer to get. We've got it on back order. My office is closed and I'm trying to buy it for when we get to come back and we can't get it. So I want people to understand it may not be that somebody doesn't want to, they just may not be able to purchase them because they're competing with hospitals and major employers, especially if you're a small employer. It's really hard. You don't have the purchasing power of a large company. Sorry.
That's a good point. Sometimes, you know, everybody's looking for masks. Everybody's looking for financial resources to get by, whether you're an individual or a business. It's just a hard time. But we can, if you have suggestions and also like, you know, keep trying to get the word out about the 311. That's not going to be an immediate response, but you know, we're doing the best we can to stop those large gatherings in particular. It's easiest when they're at a parks, you know, in a park facility or public land, but even when people see that happening in a private entity, they can call it in and we can try to send someone over there and say, look, this is not safe. Please stop gathering like this. So, and I don't know what the nature of that gathering was, Ms. Singh, but you know, it's people in their 20s are the largest group of people who are getting diagnosed with COVID-19. So they are not immune. They are getting this disease in greater numbers than any other age group. So I hope that they, you know, understand that and try to change their behavior and comply with the safer at home order. Okay. Thank you very much. I think that concludes reports of council members or committees. So let's move on to elections and confirmations.
Mayor,
yeah.
Council did ask that I read this statement, and now may be a good time to read it.
Sure.
This is from the City Code of Knoxville. All speakers and members of the audience and council shall remember that the meeting is a council meeting. All persons are to show proper respect to each other and shall maintain the proper decorum in the meeting at all times. Persons who fail to observe the rules as to proper decorum shall not be permitted to speak and may be removed from the meeting. And we'll proceed with 8A. Is a resolution appointing Tyrone Fine to serve as a member of the Knoxville Golf Course Advisory Committee.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve by Vice Mayor McKenzie, seconded by Councilwoman Singh. Please do a roll call vote.
Vice Mayor McKenzie.
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker.
Yes.
Councilwoman Ryder.
Yes.
Councilman Roberto.
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas,
Yes.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 9-0.
11A is a resolution authorizing the mayor to amend contract number C-18-0354 with USIC Locating Services LLC to provide utility location services for the city's streetlight system, increasing the annual amount by $56,000 for a new annual estimated amount of $143,000 and a new total contract amount not to exceed $350,500.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve by Councilwoman Ryder, seconded by Councilman Smith. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Johnson, please do. Oh, Ms. Singh, did
Oh,
you?
yes, please.
Yeah, okay.
I'm on. I just had some questions for Lisa New, who is the director at the Knoxville Zoo. I know that when I saw the amount.
This is 11A.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
I'm
okay.
looking at my phone and then looking at, trying to get the same thing.
This is about lighting, street lights.
That's good for me, yeah.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about item 11A? Okay, seeing none, please do a roll call vote.
Councilwoman Ryder,
Yes.
Councilman Roberto,
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas,
Yes.
Councilwoman Fugit,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries 9-0. Next item.
11B is a resolution authorizing the mayor to amend contract number C-20-0099 with Stansel Electric Company Incorporated for the on-call traffic signal infrastructure program, increasing the contract amount by $150,000 for a new contract amount not to exceed $250,000.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Councilwoman Ryder, seconded by Councilman Roberto. Any discussion? Seeing none, please conduct a roll call vote.
Councilwoman Ryder,
Yes. Yes.
Councilman Roberto,
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas. Councilman Thomas,
You got to say it.
Yes.
Councilwoman Fugit,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries 9-0. Next item.
11C is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute any and all documents necessary to apply for and, if awarded, accept a grant award from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Federal Emergency Management Agency Office in an amount not to exceed $1 million with a required 25% local match to be jointly shared by the Knoxville Police and Fire Departments to purchase equipment and supplies and to fund the cost of training, enhanced emergency communication, and cybersecurity to create a hardened infrastructure for the safety and security of local waterways.
Move to approve.
Motion made by Vice Mayor McKenzie, seconded by
Second.
Ms. Testerman. Any discussion?
Just a question. Are our waterways not under the jurisdiction of the state? What's this?
Is Chief Sharp or Chief Thomas available to answer that question? I mean, I don't think they're going to be fighting fires if there's a one call. Ms. Ryder, do you know the answer?
reviewing the agenda item documentation that came via our email, it says that this is to fight fires on the shoreline. So like buildings and other things on our shorelines, it gives them a different vantage point with this equipment.
Yeah, Mayor, this is David Brace, and Steve King could also probably opine a bit on this about the actual water itself, but we have to access properties that we have control over from the water. And so when you look at the development along our waterways, we have to still provide fire and law enforcement and rescue for those areas. And oftentimes we access it through the river.
Okay, Chiefs, do either of you, Chief Sharp, you have anything to add?
Yes, David is exactly correct on that. Yeah, this is for us to get a new fireboat. We have a fireboat, but it is not really designed to meet the needs that we have on the waterfront now. So this gives us the ability to fight fire from the water itself.
And if I could just add as well.
Thank you.
If I could just add as well, this would be over a 3-year period. And we have bridges, water treatment plant, gas storage, UT Stadium, the Ball Navy. We have a lot of waterfront development that we're not able to provide safety and fire protection for right now.
Thank you, Chief Thomas. Thank you, Chief Sharp. Any further questions about this resolution? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Johnson, would you conduct a roll call vote?
Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker,
Yes.
Councilwoman Ryder,
Yes.
Councilman Roberto,
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas,
Yes.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries 9-0. Next item, please.
12A is an ordinance to amend the operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2019-2020.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Vice Mayor McKenzie, seconded by Councilman Roberto. Any discussion?
Make it Groundhog's Day and I'll put up my hand again.
Okay, Ms. Singh?
I would just like to hear from the director of the zoo, please.
We're still not quite there. Okay. This is 11D. But I'll call on you first. I'll call
get
on
another
you first.
computer out here too.
Okay.
Ma'am,
right.
12D or 11D was a certificate of compliance. That was approved on
That was,
consent.
okay, so we are on 12.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm the
Okay.
one who's out of order.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, Lisa New, Miss New, could you
Okay.
unmute yourself?
Yes, this is Lisa New. I'm here.
Okay, Ms. Singh, go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you for being here, Lisa. Yes, well, when I first heard about the sum that was being requested, it was so large, it really blew me away. And I did need to come out and visit you at the zoo, and I appreciate all the questions you answered. But some of my concerns, it's seeming like such a big amount when we have so much need at the same time. Can you explain what the alternatives are to funding the zoo? And how did we get to this point?
Ms. New?
Yes, sure. Thank you. And everyone can hear me, I think. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to answer your questions. And I do recognize that it is a large sum of money. We have presented a plan that is a 3-month plan, anticipating closure potentially through the end of June. So when Zoo Knoxville closed on March 16th, that was the first day of Knox County spring break. That is when typically our revenues start to come in and we become cash flow positive again. So the closure caused us to lose revenues of about $20,000 a day. We did close and we made drastic reductions, but the animals are still there, 700 animals. We have reduced our personnel by 40%. We have cut our overhead substantially as well. But Councilwoman Singh, you walk through the zoo, you know, it's a large park. It's a 54-acre park, 700 animals, and it is operated under contract with the city. So we do need the city's emergency relief. Even though we've closed, we still are incurring expenses every day to maintain the park and primarily to take care of our animals.
Okay, and then you also have a rainy day fund of sorts. Can you talk about that?
We have, at the time of our closure, we had an operating reserve about $600,000. When we say that the timing happened at the very worst time of the year, that is very accurate statement. So that reserve is our balance in our operating line of credit. We have a $1.5 million operating line of credit. And we draw on that to pay our expenses in January and February when it's cold and people aren't coming to the zoo. And then we begin to pay that down. So in the, if the closure, for instance, had happened in July or August, you would have found our reserve at $1.5 million instead of where it was. So it's a moving target based on what's happening at the zoo. So we had a small reserve. But again, our cash burn rate, even with our reductions, is about $189,000 a week. So you can do the math to see why that is an urgent crisis for us without any revenue coming in. 75% of our revenues come from our gate admissions and from birthday parties and picnics and all of those things that people enjoy with the zoo. We do not have those revenues coming in, yet we still are incurring our expense.
Right. It's about $200,000 a week, you were saying. A lot of that goes towards paying the employees as well.
It's true. About 52% of our expenses are for personnel. And to put that in perspective, I mentioned we had a 40% reduction in personnel cost. But of my staff, I have about 50 animal keepers, 50 keepers that care for those 700 animals. Their pay has also been reduced, despite the fact that I still need them to work 40 hours a week. All of us took substantial pay cuts, but the keepers are still there. So, and doing the work to care for the animals.
Okay, and then you're going to be applying for funds with the state and federally as well for payroll as well, right?
Yeah, so since I presented to Mayor Kincannon, a few things have happened that that were not certain at the time of the request. We had anticipated, and in fact, it did occur, that we got a $500,000 loan. So let me back up to say that my 3-month plan to operate the zoo during closure at a bare bones level is about $2.1 million. So it's a big number for 3 months. So we're trying to cobble together funding any way we can, and we have not ceased to do that since we made our request. So we got the $500,000 loan from the county, which was much appreciated. We have an emergency relief fund that we sent out to our public. And to date, that has raised $162,000, and that comes from 1,360 donors. So again, almost our donors have almost paid for a week of our operations. We have applied for the PPP, the Payroll Protection Plan. If we are awarded that, we are awaiting notification, but we did file our application on Monday. We tried on Friday, but we couldn't get in. And that should award about 1.1 million. And then we've also applied for the SBA program, the loan program, but that is a collateralized loan, and all of our collateral is the city's, is tied up in the city's assets. It's the buildings belong to the city, so we're not sure what the award for that would be. Oh, and the one I didn't mention is we do have relief funding request from Senator Massey and the entire Knoxville delegation, a request into Governor Lee, but we've yet to have a response on that.
Okay. The reason I was asking about the funds that you will be getting is we had talked yesterday about if it was possible for the city to do this as a loan with the same type of loose terms as what the county gave you.
Yes, and my response to that is that, we are in a very desperate situation. We are grateful for whatever the city is able to do, but the county is alone. We have an operating line of credit, but that is a high interest loan, and none of those replace the revenues that we are losing every day. So it just kicks our can down the road, so to speak. It makes us more vulnerable when we open. We have not replaced those revenues. We are just incurring debt that we have to pay back over time. Some of you privately have asked me how we would avoid this happening again. And we certainly were well on our way, a 5-year plan to have $1 million in reserve in addition to our line of credit. We were 3 years in and had met our goal of $200,000 saved a year. But if we receive nothing but loans, that just makes us extremely vulnerable further down the line.
But the payroll loans are forgivable.
The
payroll, if you get them.
The payroll loans are forgivable if you restore pay back to the original levels up to $100,000, I believe. And that's for an 8-week period. So it would not cover us indefinitely, but we would certainly hope that should we get that, that would provide an opportunity for us to reduce the debt we already have, the $1.1 million on the line of credit, and free up some liquidity should this event go on further.
Okay. It is a huge operation. I was really surprised to be there yesterday. 700 animals, $700,000, that's $1,000 an animal just to feed. So I forgot the last question I had. That's it. I'll think of it in a minute.
We can come back
Anybody
to
else?
thing, Ms. Testerman. And then Mr. Smith after that.
So thank you, Ms. New, for giving us that information. I appreciate the time that you've spent with me on the phone, really painting the full picture of that. I think, obviously in going through all of this, it is a substantial amount of money. There are a lot of question marks out there when it comes to the SBA loan. Also with the budget that the city has yet to put together and pass, obviously with the hope that as well that the city's allocation comes in July. So looking into the end of June, and then this potentially the city's allocation of what they've been doing, the 1.45 million and whatever that looks like moving forward. I think again, I think it would be helpful and would be interested on the rest of council's feedback if council passes this tonight. The distribution is over 3 months, correct? So it's April, May, and June, 200,000 each. And so I think it would be really helpful if you would be able to come back before each of those distributions to give council an update on where you are, how, have those loans been realized, what's the status? And again, looking, because we're dealing with so many unknowns, what is your team, what does the board come up with a long-term or longer-term strategy on, how things are starting to shape up, and have there been any other creative solutions or problem solving that you all are thinking about for a longer term should this pandemic last longer than any of us certainly hope.
Ms. Snood, did you want to respond to that?
Sure, I will be happy to. Well, I wanted to first say I would be, if council would like to hear from me before that distribution every month, I would be happy to give updates. I'll also say that, you know, since we have a new appointment on the board in Stephanie Welsh, Gwen McKenzie is our city council appointment on the board. But when Stephanie replaced Jim York. And so her first board meeting hit right when the pandemic began. And so she's not yet been on the board. The reason I say that is, again, I'm happy to come to council every month, but the city has representation on our board. Stephanie's first board meeting will be April 15th. Stephanie and I have set up check-ins on April 10th of every month before any disbursement would go to the zoo, essentially doing just as you said, Janet, reporting on that. So again, I would be happy to give any kind of input, updates, but I do know that Vice Mayor McKenzie and Stephanie Welsh are going to be part of that strategic planning, looking at the zoo's future moving forward.
Yeah, I just thought it might be helpful too for constituents, I think, as they see this from a public perspective. You know, again, knowing that they're large dollars, that there are a lot of people that are struggling and trying to look at their futures financially, that it might just be helpful from a public perspective. You know, for you to be able to kind of to share that information. But you all, you know, you do a great job. You know, obviously understand animal welfare, and it's a lot of work. So, you know, and I know it's hard, and the nonprofit world is hard as well.
Thank you, Ms. Testerman. Mr. Smith, and then Ms. Fugate.
Yeah, just one quick question. Was there a dollar amount tied to the grant request from the state, or the emergency request from the state?
Yes, essentially we ask for a gap to fill, assuming that, or hoping that something would come through from the city. And we had already accounted for what happened with the county. So the request to the state is for $868,000. That number would essentially allow us to pay down our line of credit, be able to fund the zoo at the bare bones level for the next 3 months, and then preserve that line of credit liquidity as we move into the rest of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Fugate.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I plan to support this. The zoo is a tremendous asset for the city, and it is through no fault of the zoos that they find themselves in this situation. They're like everybody else. They're trying to cobble together to keep their business model going. The line of credit does have to be paid off. It has to rest for 30 days. I feel Ms. New's pain greatly. This is our cookie season. The same thing happens when you get your cash in March and a pandemic stops your revenue from coming. It's not your fault. And so I would I'm fine with us asking for reports, but I fully intend to support this.
Thank you, Ms. Fugate. Ms. Parker.
Thank you. My comments are more about process than questions for the Knoxville Zoo, because I obviously love the Knoxville Zoo and have been going there all my life and have all of the lovely pictures of riding elephants at the Knoxville Zoo that I'm fond of, and I want, you know, future generations to have those experiences as well. So I do not want to see us lose our zoo in Knoxville. My concern is that we are not getting a full picture of the needs, and that full picture is really something that the administration is privy to, and it seems under our state of emergency, the administration has the full authority to make emergency funding allocations. If there is anything that threatens the physical, economic health of our community, I imagine that is within the powers of the mayor. And so I was a little concerned with our agenda item that we were being asked whether to allocate this as a part of next year's budget, in addition to next year's budget. And you know, it's difficult for us to be able to make that decision of what we as a city have the capacity to do because we don't have that overview. And so my recommendation would be for this to be a decision that is left with the mayor so that we can, as a city council, have a more thorough understanding of what budget is about to come before us in 2 weeks and make decisions based on that thorough presentation of where we're at. Because there was another issue that was previously on this agenda that I was very interested in talking about testing for our first responders, and there was an amount budgeted for that. So I didn't know if that was spending that was continuing, if that was something that the administration is moving forward without city council vote. Those are my questions about the process.
Well, I'll speak to that. The 40,000 for testing for our first responders was something we moved forward with, and I believe we're able to fund with existing budgetary monies. And also was a relatively low dollar amount, and just went ahead and did that in part because of such a crucial thing that our first responders be able to get testing and get it done at the center and that sort of thing. So this proposal is amending this year's budget, not next year's budget. So that's why I was bringing it to you. And it's, I think in general, good practice. I do think I have some authority to spend money in an emergency basis, but I still want to come to the council and get, I went ahead and forwarded $100,000. And if you guys choose not to support this tonight, I'll still, keep that going. And I don't know what, I'll decide about the balance of 600,000, but I think this is a big, important part of our economy and also a big ask. And I didn't want to do that unilaterally without seeking the support of council, because I understand your concerns and I share them about why this came up and it's such a big amount and that sort of thing. So, but I think it's in general my hope to seek budget work with council on particularly big budget items. So that's why I brought it to you, and it is for this budget year. Ms. Welch, did you have anything you want to add? She's been sort of taking the lead on the zoo stuff. If you wanted to speak to address some of those concerns, please do.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to make sure I understand what concerns I'm addressing. What I can tell you is that I have gone over our contract with the zoo very thoroughly. And I, just as a reminder to council, and I know that this was stated by Ms. New, but the city actually owns the property and all of the assets on the zoo. We're basically contracting with the zoo the nonprofit to manage those assets. So I don't know that this has been said directly, but it's in our best interest, not only for the overall, it's a huge regional attraction. This is a world-class zoo that we have in our community. So there's a big economic development reason to support the zoo. It's a local attraction for our residents as well. But really, when it comes down to it, the success of the zoo is important so that the city doesn't get back into the business of being zookeepers. So I think that we're, the zoo has done a good job of managing the property, and I think according to our contract, we will continue to work with them to make sure that they're doing the things they need to do to move their finances forward as they have been over the past few years. So I welcome anybody's input on, the kind of things that you want Ms. New and I to be touching base about. If we need to bring this back to council for regular updates, we can look at that as well. But I think what makes this a little bit different from many of the other nonprofits in our community, all of which are doing great work, some of whom are represented on city council, we actually own the property that the zoo sits on. So it's a different relationship we have with the zoo, with the city. I don't know, Mayor, if that answers your question or if any council members have questions for me.
Just to clarify the memo that came from the finance department. The memo says that there's a $700,000 request. If we do not approve the request, $100,000 will be deducted from next year's fiscal year 2021, next year's Zoo Knoxville budget. What about the other $600,000?
This is Boyd Evans here, the Deputy Finance Director. That is correct. In other words, if you all disapprove that, then I think next year, FY21, it's supposed to be 1.45 million that goes to the zoo. We would just be 1.35 million. We would take in other words, they wouldn't get that additional $100,000. This, the balance, the 600K for a total of 7 is what you're being asked to approve right now. It would come out of this budget, FY20, the current budget, not the upcoming budget. And I mean, it's your decision as to whether you approve it or not.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Why don't we'll come back, Ms. Parker. Several other council members want to ask questions, and if you come back to if you still have more questions. Vice Mayor McKenzie.
I'm sorry, did Councilwoman Singh want to make a statement?
Yeah, but you hadn't gone yet. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'll close it out.
Okay, I was just going to say this, I do see this as a couple different things. One, it's an investment that the city has made. If we don't continue that, we're going to lose a lot. There are also about 150 jobs there during the year. But really what comes to mind is this feels like a puppy that we bought when times were good. Now times are hard. We still have to take care of it.
Yep.
Good.
That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Singh.
And I just have to say again, my question is that this is the owner's request before city council. Even if we look at CAC, what we I have, will they need a budget increase next year? I participated in those budget hearings, but I don't get access to the same materials that the administration has access to the full request, but just having a more comprehensive conversation is what makes most sense and seems most fiscally responsible. And if we're not able to predict what essentially, the mayor is preparing for us, it seems like a decision that should sit with the mayor. And then there will be a lower general fund balance that comes to us in the budget proposal.
Councilmember Ryder, I muted you. I think the birds were creating some disturbance.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Parker. Did Ms. Ryder, did you want to speak? Will,
yes.
Could you unmute her?
Yeah, I
Mr. Thomas will be next. Yeah.
Okay,
Go ahead,
sorry.
Ms. Ryder, go ahead.
Trying to get a word in edgewise over the birds and everybody else. And now I've forgotten what I was even going to say. I like Councilwoman Singh's analogy about this being a cute puppy, and now times are hard and we still got to take care of it. But I personally am in not a position to take home an exotic animal and foster it. So I'm going to support this. I did have extensive conversation with Ms. New about things that they were doing to cut back. I'm not going to elaborate it, but you know, in terms of things they were adding to future infrastructure, they've cut back on some of the capital improvements. And I was I felt good knowing that they've really exhausted. I mean, they're backed against a wall, as many families and many people are in the community. This is unprecedented. We have no idea how long it's going to last. And this is devastating for our community. I mean, nightly, you fight back tears at all the things that are happening in our community here, just here, much less the world around us, what the things that are happening. So we are in a position to help them figure it out. And I think that there's a lot of discussion going on right now about how they can have a plan in the future to avoid a situation like this in case it were to happen again. And I appreciate Ms. New's time, and I appreciate her creative analysis, her and the board, to try and figure out how to make things work and piece things together. And we talked about how to get them open. And what that's going to look like in the future with potential social distancing still in place with a flare up. So I do plan to support it. It's still a hard pill to swallow. It's a lot of money. So anyway, that's just kind of a rambling way of saying I'm supporting it, and I'm not thrilled about giving money, and we've got to figure out how to solve all these problems. It's a difficult time.
Thank you, Ms. Ryder. Mr. Thomas, and then Ms. Testerman.
Yes, this has been an excellent discussion. I commend council for it. It is a lot of money. I just wanted to make a comment about the educational asset that the zoo is. It provides a lot of, mainly I'm thinking of underprivileged youth who wouldn't ordinarily have the opportunity to get this experience. I know they do a lot of things for free in the community. The public schools are allowed to do field trips to the zoo and allow kids, regardless of their economic situation, to be able to have this experience. So in some ways, it's an investment in education. It is a lot of money, but overall, I think it's worth it. So I'm going to support it as well.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Ms. Testerman.
Just wanted to add as well, I mean, to add insult to injury in this, you know, their largest fundraiser is generally the 1st of June. And obviously that is going to have to be postponed and or canceled. I don't know what the thought is there. You know, I don't want to make any mistake that I'm wholeheartedly, you know, the zoo is an incredible value to this community, and we all, I think we're all on the same page with that. So I just wanted to iterate that. And, you know, I think the recommendation of just, you know, Lisa New coming back, I think, just to kind of hear, because I think we're all invested in it. We know that it is a lot of money. So I think to be able to keep our finger on the pulse just to see what may, but that might be through Ms. Welch, you know, or Councilwoman McKenzie being able to give us frequent updates. But I think there's a lot of members of the public too that are invested in this as well, and would like to be, you know, brought up to speed, you know, as to, you know, how things are progressing and moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, Vice Mayor McKenzie, you wanted to be the last one to speak. Is that right? That's fine. Mr. Smith.
Well, I thought I did.
Yeah.
Is that okay? All right. Yeah, I'll just say this is a really hard decision. It is a lot of money. There are a lot of people suffering, but what does make the decision a little easier is the financial stewardship that you've shown since taking over the zoo. The 5-year plan, just for a rainy day fund to save $200,000 every year, shows that you're bracing for some amount of emergency. This is extraordinary, but I commend you for that, and I plan to support it as well. But that makes it a little easier knowing that the financial stewardship is sound at the zoo. So thank you for that.
Thank you. May I respond to that?
Yes, Ms. New, go ahead.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. I just wanted to say I do appreciate recognizing our goal to raise or save $1 million in 5 years. And again, we were 3 years in, but the zoo has had substantial growth the past several years, 15% revenue growth since 2014. And we have use those cash reserves not only to improve our reserve, but also to improve the living wage of our employees. So $1 million over the past 3 years, we have put into improving the base wages of our most vulnerable employees. So you have college educated and very skilled craftsmen who are starting at $8 an hour. And that was 3 years ago. They're now at $10.5 an hour. It's a slow process. But again, in terms of how did the zoo get to this point, we have invested in a reserve, in our staff, and also in maintaining the park. So, you know, capital money and maintenance has gone into the investment of Zoo Knoxville to make it a better place for the community. And we have also managed to, you know, maintain a 3% margin in our net income over all those years. So I appreciate that. You know, there are still limited resources, and we have tried to tackle several fronts with the revenue growth that we've had. So thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor McKenzie.
Anybody else? Okay, so a lot of good feedback, a lot of good comments. And Lisa, thank you for being on the line to address concerns and answer some of the questions that were asked by council. Zoo Knoxville is one of the city's largest tourist attractions that brings in and generates tax dollars into the city. In addition to that, it also gives back to our Knox County school students annually by allowing them to be able to get free admission into the zoo. The executive board of Zoo Knoxville understands the urgency and is working their strategic plan, a long-term strategic plan, as Lisa talked about, as it relates to reserves for the zoo. The zoo has grown leaps and bounds in the last 20 years. When Councilmember Parker talked about riding the elephant, you know, I think about Big Diamond. When I was little, that was there at the zoo. And so when you think back to where the zoo was when we were younger, fast forward to where it is today and some of the projects that are going on there at the zoo, we have a world-class zoo here in Knoxville, Tennessee, one that we definitely can be proud of, but one that I think that most people would agree that the city, we do not want to be in the zoo business. Someone asked, well, what's the flip side if we don't help support the zoo and help keep them going during this crisis? And that is potentially that they could bankrupt and they would default back to us. And in our attempts to be able to keep the zoo going, have to do additional contracts that would potentially cost us a lot more money than what they're taking to operate currently. And so I'm pleased and I'm satisfied with what I've heard as it relates to their plans going forward, what they're doing to tap into funding, in addition to what they're requesting from the city to be able to keep the zoo operations going. It does appear that they are down to bare bones as it relates to the operations outside of the animal upkeep at this particular point and just the grounds upkeep at this point. Difficult decision that we have to make today. But aside from the zoo, I want to ask my colleagues here on City Council to please keep an open mind, because as this global pandemic continues and as it drags on, we are going to be faced with even more difficult decisions as it relates to organizations that will need potentially significant assistance to be able to stay open. I'm very interested in making sure that we're focusing on our vulnerable population as we move forward, because as this continues to move forward, their needs will definitely increase. And so I just want us to keep that in mind as we move forward. So I will be in support, of course, of this, of providing the funding to the zoo, as I did make the motion to approve it, and appreciate all of your comments, all of your concerns, and just ask that we all just kind of keep that in mind. This is one of very many probably difficult decisions that we're going to have to make before this thing is over. And I just want to thank everyone for keeping an open mind. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Johnson, would you conduct a roll call vote?
Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker,
I'll abstain.
Councilwoman Ryder,
Yes.
Councilman Roberto,
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Unmute, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas,
Yes.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries with 8 yeses and 1 abstention. Next item, please.
12C is an ordinance appropriating the sum of $1,000 from the Community Empowerment Budget and donating same to Next Step Initiative through its fiscal agent, Community Shares, to be utilized toward a series of activities to support children and families from Montgomery Village.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Vice Mayor
Can I hear a
McKenzie,
little?
seconded by acclamation, I think. Any discussion?
Could we hear a little about that program?
Mr. Lomax, are you on this? Can I?
Yes.
Mr. Lomax, yeah, if you could speak to this, please.
Absolutely. So this is a partner that we previously have funded in years past, and they continue to do great work within the community with those that are without residence and those that are underprivileged in many capacities. And so they work with health, mental health, conflict management, making sure that there are resources available and training with HIV prevention, Narcan, and a number of community partners throughout the city. And recently, in light of everything going on with COVID-19, we've been on the ground fighting to make sure that this community stays healthy and safe.
Thank you, Mr. Lomax. Any other questions about this?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. I want to commend Addie and the team at Next Step. That I got to visit them and take some supplies, and they're working around the clock, loving on folks that need it most, and they work closely with CAC and other agencies that are meaningful in South Knoxville. But I can't say enough about the role they're playing in South Knoxville particularly.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any further discussion?
Richard, I echo what Mr. Smith says, because it's startling, to have our agenda. We just finished an agenda item allocating hundreds of thousands, and we know how much hard work this group is doing. It allocates 1,000. That's why I was curious what that 1,000 was for, so that we could have a sense of what that need is, because whatever it is, we know 1,000 ain't covering it all.
Councilwoman Parker, if I may, that was an amount that was requested by that organization. And so in them requesting that amount, that's what we funded through our department.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? If it helps me if you raise your hand. Any further discussion? Okay, Ms. Vice Mayor?
So, Mayor, I just wanted, for the record, I was going to ask that question, what was the amount that was requested? And Mr. Lomax answered that question, that was the amount, the $1,000 was what was requested by the organization. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further discussion, please take a roll call vote.
Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker,
Yes.
Councilwoman Ryder,
Yes.
Councilman Roberto,
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas,
Yes.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries 9-0.
12D is an ordinance appropriating the sum of $6,000 from the community empowerment budget and donating same to youth outreach in science, technology, engineering, and math to be utilized toward its Girls in STEM program.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Vice Mayor McKenzie, seconded by Councilman Smith. Any discussion? Hearing none, please take a roll call vote.
Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker,
Yeah.
Councilwoman Ryder,
Yes.
Councilman Roberto,
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas,
Yes.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries 9-0. Next item, please.
12E is an ordinance appropriating the sum of $10,000 from the community empowerment budget and donating same to Freedom Village of Hope as fiscal agent for the East Tennessee Freedom Schools program to host summer enrichment programs.
Move to approve.
Motion made by Ms. Parker, seconded by Ms. Testerman. No, I'm sorry, who made the motion?
Second.
Move to approve.
Okay, sorry, motion made by Ms. McKenzie, seconded by Ms. Fugit.
Second.
Oh, Ms.
It was
Testerman.
Miss Ryder. It was Miss Ryder.
Okay, sorry.
I
Okay.
think it was Testerman, but I can't hear her, so.
I think I heard Ms. Testerman. Is that okay for you to second it, Ms. Testerman? Okay. Motion made by Vice Mayor McKenzie, seconded by Councilwoman Testerman. Any discussion? Seeing none, please take a roll call vote.
Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker,
Yes.
Councilwoman Ryder,
Yes.
Councilman Roberto,
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas,
Yes.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0. Next item, please.
12F is an ordinance appropriating the sum of $15,000 from the community empowerment budget and donating same to Penultimate Development to be utilized toward its Penult Leadership Development Program.
Move to approve.
Motion made by Vice Mayor
Second.
McKenzie, seconded by Councilman Roberto. Any discussion? Ms. Testerman? Oh. No. Seeing no discussion, please do a roll call vote.
Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker,
Yeah.
Councilwoman Ryder,
Yes.
Councilman Roberto,
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas,
Yes.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0. Next item, please.
12G is an ordinance to approve 4 minor amendments to the Knoxville City Code Appendix B zoning code as more fully set out herein. Knoxville, Knox County Planning applicant, all districts.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Councilman Roberto, seconded by, who seconded that? I don't know. Was it Ms. McKenzie?
I had McKenzie.
Okay. Okay. Any discussion? Is that, no, seeing no discussion, please take a roll call vote.
Councilman Roberto,
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas,
Yes.
Councilwoman Fugit,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker,
Yes.
Councilwoman Ryder.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0. Next item, please.
12H is an ordinance to adopt the one-year plan dated 2020 as prepared by the Knoxville, Knox County Planning Commission for the city of Knoxville, all districts.
Mr. Roberto?
Thank you, Mayor. Since this is a pretty complex item, I thought I'd direct some questions before we get started to Director Green, if he's present.
I'm present. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Director Green. With regard to the land use classification table that we find in the Appendix B of the packet, I believe it's page 219, is RN3 included in low density residential?
I'll answer that question and provide some background information. It is included in the low density residential. That's because when looking at the zoning map, there are several existing attached unit developments that are located within areas designated on sector plan or one-year plan as low density residential. These are low density developments that comply with the low density standards or the density standards or the LDR land use classification, but they provide a different type of housing than typical single family. Provides options for housing throughout the community, and that was the desire here, not necessarily to override the density standards of the low density residential designation, but to provide opportunities for a variety of housing types. As a townhouse development in the RN3, a special use permit is required. That requires approval by the Planning Commission. One of the standards for approval of a special use is compliance with adopted plans and policies. So the low density residential density designations and requirements would go with the approval of the variety of housing types, in this case, a townhome development.
So in that, the low density, that's supposed to be limited to less than 6 units per acre?
That's correct, but it does not limit the type of housing. And what we're trying to do is, again, comply by putting this in the low density residential category, allow our opportunities for a variety of housing type development within the low density areas. For example, steeper slopes, a property with steeper slopes could be developed with townhomes clustered, where if the townhome development were not permitted, they'd have to be divided into lots and created land disturbance.
Well, it's my understanding that plans review and inspection issues permits based on district dimensional standards, not based on the one-year plan or sector plans. So if RN3 is included in low density residential, then it would allow a duplex on a minimum lot size of 7,500 square feet, which would be 10 units an acre, when the low density in the plan we just talked about has to be less than 6. Is that correct?
That's correct. And possibly it's time to review our land use density standards, because quite honestly, 6 units per acre is far below low density in an urban setting. We need to start accepting the fact that we're an urban community and review those. I'm not sure what the answer is in terms of the maximum density for low density, but is 6 the correct number in an urban setting?
Okay, so there is some conflict there, I guess.
Correct, and some of that likely is because our plans, the land use classification table has not been thoroughly updated, and the land use classifications have not been reviewed thoroughly for years.
Okay. Well, council members, as you can see by what we just talked about, and I thank Director Green for answering these questions. I think we've got some substantive changes that are coming in here that really require robust discussion with public participation outside of limitations we have during this Zoom meeting. Many of our neighbors don't have access to technology or the internet, and without access to libraries, they might be unable to have their voice heard tonight on such a substantive change. So I'd like to make a 3-part motion actually to remove these substantive changes from the 2021 year plan. Earlier this afternoon, Mr. Johnson had emailed a copy of the land use classification table that council passed unanimously back in November of 2019. So I make a motion that we substitute the land use classification table in our packet with the land use classification table council passed in November of 2019. Further, I make a motion that on page 12 in the low density residential section, under item C, we remove RN3.
Mr. Roberto, I think we should entertain one motion at a time.
Well, I was trying to put them all in one, but we can do them one at a time. That's okay.
Well, you can tell them. I mean, I think it's just going to be a little complicated, and maybe,
True.
and I don't, the item that you mentioned, we don't have that. The substitute document. At least
it was emailed to council this afternoon.
Oh.
So I can start there. I'll make the motion that we substitute the November 2019 land use chart or table from the one that's in the packet.
I'll second that motion. And
okay, motion made by Mr. Roberto, seconded by Councilwoman Ryder. Ms. Ryder, did you want to discuss that, or you want to? I'm a little fuzzy on what the differences are. I understand the original agenda item, but I don't, and I think it's consistent with our efforts towards affordable housing as well.
It is the addition of the RN3 in low density. And so when we go back to this would remove the substantive change of adding in RN3 during the Zoom meeting, basically.
Well, Ms. Ryder, or did someone else have, Mr. Thomas?
Yes, I guess I'm just looking for some clarification right now. I heard Councilperson Roberto's discussion about possibly the need to postpone this and have more discussion on it. And then it sounds like we're supposed to be voting on parts of it in piecemeal. So I guess my question is, are we going to postpone it as a whole and then have a discussion about it at a later date? Or are we going to have votes on part of it in sections and then postpone the rest of it? I guess I'm just not clear on it.
We're required to pass the one-year plan, Councilperson Thomas, so we can't really postpone it. What I'm suggesting is that there's a substantive change here, and that this may not be the appropriate venue or time to do a substantive change. So the most logical thing to do would be to go back to what we passed in November of 2019. If this change is a good idea, it'll be a good idea when we can meet in the city county building again.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
So there's a motion to amend one document for another. I haven't seen the document. You didn't copy me or anyone from the administration, I guess. So I can't, I'm not exactly, I personally don't understand what you're doing, but maybe other people do. Councilwoman Testerman.
Councilman Roberto, I do understand that with the RN3, wasn't there also the addition of RN5? Are you looking at that as a third
There's going to be a three-part motion. So yeah, that'll come up next. Yes.
Okay. Councilwoman Fugit.
So as I understand this, it is basically, we're going to put into the one-year plan what council approved 4 months ago unanimously, until such time we can talk about these proposals from the planning department in a larger, more public forum. Is that the gist of what you're trying to accomplish, Mr. Roberto?
Exactly.
Thank you.
Mr. Roberto, I know that we should parliamentary wise consider one motion at a time, but perhaps before we take a vote on this, you could give us a preview of the motions to come, just so we know the whole picture.
Just a quick question on this motion before you do that.
Go ahead.
Ms. Parker.
Okay. Are there additional changes that have been made to that table that aren't captured in the version that was passed by City Council in the past November? Or was that the only change that's been made to that table since last November?
That might be a good question for Director Green.
And That is the most significant there is. I'm trying to recall, because quite honestly, with the other things going on, the land use classification table has not been a high priority for me until Councilmember Roberto emailed me early this morning. The RN5 is a medium density residential, may be a change.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Parker?
Yeah, and just wanted to make a comment that I imagine these are captured in some sort of notes and minutes, but we're able to capture the work that's taken place and the conversations that have taken place since November, so they can help inform whatever additional changes come back to us the next review.
That's correct. All the changes were summarized in the staff reports provided as part of the agenda item.
Okay. Do you all want to hear the rest of the motions that are to come before we vote on this one? Okay, Mr. Roberto?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make a motion that on page 12 in the low density residential section under item C, we remove RN3. And finally, I will make a motion that on page 13 in medium density residential section under item D, we remove RN5. Those are the substantive changes that I had seen in the 2020 one-year plan. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion on this motion to amend, this first motion to amend? Does everyone understand what they're voting on? Yes? Okay. Mr. Johnson, would you do a roll call vote on this motion to amend item 12H? We'll call it motion number 1 to amend.
Councilman Roberto,
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas,
Abstain.
Councilwoman Fugit,
Yes. Yes.
Vice Mayor McKenzie, Vice Mayor
McKenzie?
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker,
I think I'll abstain as well.
Councilwoman Ryder.
Yes.
Okay, so with 7 yeses and 2 abstentions, the motion to amend, motion number 1 to amend passes. Councilman Roberto, do you want to share with us your second motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I make a motion that on page 12 in the low density residential section under item C, we remove RN3.
Is there a second to this motion? Motion number 2 to amend. A motion made by Councilman Roberto, seconded by Councilwoman Ryder. Any discussion? Seeing none, please do a roll call vote. Oh, sorry.
Question, because Councilman Roberto said that we have to pass a one-year plan. So I'm imagining there's some timeline that we're working within. But rather than vote for or against, I'm curious why we're not sending this back for further discussion for us to review at a future date.
Director Green, what is the time constraints on this agenda item?
The city charter says that the city council has to adopt a one-year plan in April, by April, the end of April.
Okay.
So we could wait for 2 weeks?
I'm not sure what good that will do.
No.
Okay. Ms. Parker, does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Okay. So we're still discussing motion number 2 to amend. Does anyone have any further questions or comments about this second motion to amend item 12H? Seeing none, please do a roll call vote, Mr. Johnson.
Councilman Roberto,
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes. Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas,
I'll abstain.
Councilwoman Fugit,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker,
I'm voting yes, since we can't postpone. My first abstention was also because I wanted to postpone. So voting yes this time.
Councilwoman Ryder,
Yes.
Was that 9-0 or was there one abstention?
8 with 1 abstention, ma'am.
Okay, 8 yeses, 1 abstention. Moving along to motion number 3.
Thank you, Mayor. I make a motion that on page 13, in medium density residential section under item D, we remove RN5.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Roberto, motion made to amend is motion number 3, and it was seconded by, who said that?
Singh.
Oh, Councilwoman Singh. Okay, so motion made to amend for the third motion. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Johnson, please conduct a roll call vote.
Councilman Roberto,
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas,
Abstain.
Councilwoman Fugit,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker,
Yeah.
Councilwoman Ryder.
Yes.
Okay, the motion to amend, the third motion to amend carries 8 yeses, 1 abstention. Now we're back to the original motion as amended by motion amendments 1, 2, and 3.
Well, Mayor, we actually made a mistake earlier. We never had a main motion on the item.
Is there a main motion on the item as amended 3 times?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve this item as amended all 3 times, made by Councilman Roberto, seconded by Councilwoman Testerman. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, please conduct a roll call vote.
Councilman Roberto,
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas,
Since it can't be postponed, yes.
Councilwoman Fugit,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker,
Yes.
Councilwoman Ryder.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries as amended 9-0. Okay, moving right along. 12I.
Yes, ma'am. 12I is an ordinance to rezone property located at 2811 Merchant Drive, parcel ID 080HC03302 from RN1 district zoning to O district zoning. Bob Alcorn, Architects Applicant, 3rd District.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve by Councilwoman Singh, seconded by Councilwoman Ryder. Any discussion? Seeing none, please conduct a roll call vote.
Councilwoman Singh,
Yes.
Councilman Smith,
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
Yes.
Councilman Thomas,
Yes.
Councilwoman Fugit,
Yeah.
Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker,
Yes.
Councilwoman Ryder,
Yes.
Councilman Roberto.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0. Next item is 12J.
12J is an ordinance to rezone property located at 920 Oak Grove Lane, parcel ID 121GG019 from RN1 district zoning to RN2 district zoning. Victor Jernigan, applicant, 2nd District.
Mr. Roberto.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to hear from anyone in the neighborhood who signed up to speak and from the developer first, if we could.
We do have Mr.
Yeah, who signed up to speak?
Yes, we have Mr. Jernigan is signed up, and we also have Miss English. You want to hear from Mr. Jernigan first?
Sure, if he signed up first, we can hear him first. Or yeah, I guess he's yay.
He's the applicant. Yeah.
Got it. Mr. Jernigan, are you on?
Yes.
Okay, if you could start by stating your name and address for the record.
Victor Jernigan, 815 Sunnydale Road, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37923.
Okay.
This rezoning request is for the redevelopment of a tract of ground on in the heart of West Knoxville. It's adjoins the nursing home, assisted living center that used to be the Breakville Nursing Home on Lions View on one side and the Veteran Cemetery on the other side. The nursing home also owns an adjoining residential house on that adjoins the third side of this property. So the property is surrounded on two sides by R6 zoning, which is required for the nursing home and the Veteran Cemetery. The request for the rezoning, and I hope all the city council members received an email that I sent yesterday, the very gracious meeting that was held by Ms. Elizabeth Freeman at her house in December, talking about the different options which were available for the property. In that meeting, as I summarized, the view of the neighbors was that they would prefer nothing to happen to the property, but after consideration, they would agree to 4 residential lots. The issue came up that to obtain the 4 residential lots, I needed to rezone the property to the R2 zoning. I have met with the neighbors before I purchased, when I had it under contract, before I purchased it. I've kept them completely informed all the way through at every opportunity with site plans and the look and feel of what we're doing. None of that is obligated, as they would say, Mr. Green would say, as part of the zoning process. But it shows the good faith effort on my part to meet the needs and the requirements of the neighbors as the way they would like to see the property developed. The issue has come up that I need to have the R2 zoning to be able to come up with the 4 lots without any variances. And there's a site plan included in your package that I presented to show that we have a site plan which does allow for 4 lots, which does allow by right 4 single family houses. And we have also worked to keep the neighbors involved as to the kind of houses we would build and the look and feel of what that would be. So the issue has gotten to be that they're concerned that the R2 zoning opens up a density greater than what I'm proposing. And they're worried about the fact that this is what they've expressed to me. They may have other concerns, but their primary concern has been to me that if I lose control of the property somehow, somebody else could come in and propose something that they wouldn't like. There's 2 issues there. The first is that whatever is done to this property, it has to go back to MPC for approval of the concept plan. It has to be done. And then separate, in addition to that, it has to go back for the final plat approval. The issue of the economics of what is going to happen in this property, this is probably, if you were putting a bullseye on the most expensive 1 mile circle of real estate in the city of Knoxville, this is it. The chance of anybody acquiring this property to do anything less than something that would meet the needs of the people who want to live in that community is remote. Additionally to that, as I've stated, I can never rule out the possibility, and this is not part of the zoning consideration, and I recognize that, but it's a direct answer to the neighbors' questions. I see no situation that even in the middle of the COVID crisis that we're having and the pandemic continuing, I see no situation in which my family would not continue to maintain control of this property into the distant future. It was purchased for that purpose, and plans have already been put in place to make sure that that is going to continue to happen. I have no way to overcome the fear of somebody else doing something else with the property, but all I can do is demonstrate a long history of doing what I say I'm going to do, and the fact that I've already spent and again, it's not part of the zoning process, but I've demonstrated the fact that I have spent thousands and thousands of dollars in engineering and architecture fees to keep the neighbors involved of what my goals and plans are for the property. But I do ask you to support the strong staff recommendation for the R2 rezoning and an overwhelming vote at the Planning Commission for the R2 rezoning to allow me to move forward with the project. Thank you very much.
Councilman Roberto.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Jarnigan, can I ask you a question following up on your statement? It sounds to me from reading the packet and your email, and I appreciate that, and I also appreciate you working hard to be communicating with the neighbors in the neighborhood. That's always a very welcome thing to hear. Is your plan to have 4 single-family homes on that property?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions for Mr. Jernigan? And then we have another person sign. Oh, Ms. Testerman, you have to unmute. Yeah.
Sorry. Mr. Jernigan, I was just going to ask, I mean, and again, it sounds to me that the concern is that you wouldn't be able to fulfill your obligation, and then a potential developer may come in and do something definitely outside really the scale and scope of the neighborhood. But it sounds to me, and if you could just clarify and verify, that you've really worked hard to keep with the integrity of the neighborhood, the integrity of the area that it's in, to keep it, you know, virtually in scale with the surrounding houses and neighborhood.
And I thank you very much for the question. That has been exactly what we've made the effort to do, because I view this, and our family views it as a long-term asset for our family. It is in our best interest that we do something which works within the guidelines of the neighborhood and the scope of the neighborhood. And so which was the reason that I began to get the neighbors involved while I had the property under contract, and have continued to keep them involved all the way through the process. When we had the meeting, one of the decisions that we were making at the time was to create an opportunity for diversity of housing in the zip code in this area. We looked at doing a more intensive development of the property. But after meeting the neighbors, seeing and spending some time understanding what was going on in the neighborhood specifically, it is just realistic to develop the property as 4 residential houses. It works beautifully with all the other houses that are in the neighborhood. These houses will be all in that 2,000, 2,300 square foot range, which is very much in keeping with the neighborhood that's there. So I have worked very hard. My architect has worked very hard, and the engineering firm has worked very hard to create the site plan that you have and the house plans that you have as our demonstration as to how this project is going to move forward.
And several of the neighbors, if I'm correct, are okay with the 4 units versus the fear of it could potentially be up to 8. So, but they seem to be on board with the fact that you were now have scaled it back to 4.
So when I received the email from Elsbeth about that they would accept 4 residential lots, I have moved forward with 4 residential lots and no other plans since then, and have demonstrated that that's all that we're planning to do. There is no way for me to be able to demonstrate there's no way to overcome their objection about something else happening to the property other than the fact of the statements that I'm making right now, and the fact that I have demonstrated the absolute effort to spend the money to prove to them that what I'm asking for can be done and will be done.
So they haven't really objected to you. They've just, there's a fear factor there on again, should something you default or it be foreclosed upon.
That's been what I've understood as their primary objection. Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Testerman. Mr. Thomas.
Yes, Mr. Jernigan. As the code is now, as the zoning is now, how many residences could you build?
Technically, you could I can build three with the size of the property that's there today. I can build 3 residential houses.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Jernigan? Oh, Ms. Parker, okay, sorry.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Jernigan. In looking at the site plans, it looks like there's almost a natural cutoff with the commercial building next door to your property. But the changing the zoning of your property extends that, let me go to the question. My question is there a plan for any sort of buffer to help distinguish one zoning area from the R1 residential zoning area?
That is, Ms. Parker, effectively the R2 zoning is a transitional residential zoning that allows for a greater diversity of housing types in a low density residential development, a low density residential area. The discussion that you just had on the R3 zoning, whether it should be low density or not, is clear that the R2 density, by that discussion alone, it's clear that the R2 zoning is an acceptable zoning for low density residential. It just simply allows for some flexibility of the R2 designation allows for flexibility of design. And we need that flexibility because of the size of the lot to be able to get the 4 residential properties on there and to lay it out without any need of variances. And so the lots that are there are all laid out without any variances being needed for the properties. And as you've seen from other zonings that have gone forward, being able to make a plan that you know are going to need variances is a mistake for what would be coming forward for a subdivision. So we wanted a proof of concept site plan, which is what I provided, that shows that we need the R2 zoning to be able to meet the 4 lots that I've said we were going to do. I hope that wasn't too long of an answer. I didn't mean to be rambling.
No, and I imagine the details in the drawings look lovely, and there are actually details on the house. So I imagine these are you're planning to sell at market rate.
These are it will be certainly at a it will not be an inexpensive place to live.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Any more questions for Mr. Jernigan right at the moment? Okay, should we move to Ms. English? Is the second person signed up for public to speak on this agenda item?
That's right, ma'am.
Ms. English, are you on the call? Yeah, there you are. If you could unmute yourself and state your name and address for the record, and then say what you'd like to say, and then I think council members may have some questions for you. You need to unmute yourself. There you go.
All right. You good?
Yep,
Okay.
we can hear you.
Very English.
Now we can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Now we can. Okay.
Okay. Do you need the address again?
Please.
Okay. 810 Oak Grove Lane. And I'm speaking on behalf of my neighbors, Elspeth Freeman and Nan Johnson Morgan, as well as myself. I want to, first of all, I also appreciate, as do my neighbors, Victor Jernigan's reaching out to us about his plans before he firmed them up. That said, there are a couple of errors, I would say, in what he said. One was that we never contemplated going outside of an R1 or RM1 zoning, the current zoning. When we discussed when we got together and discussed the options that he had, he laid out some options that we entertained, but then privately talked about and said, no, we want to stay with the R1 zoning. So we came back to him and said, if you can do it with 4 houses, go for it. his drawings look attractive for sure. It appears that, but then without telling us, he decided to seek R2 zoning. So there was not a discussion at that point. What we subsequently suggested to him was that he could either tear down the existing house, which is making it difficult to put 4 single-family houses there, or he could, instead of having having 3 additional single-family houses, he could have a duplex, which he would, granted, he would have to get special use permission, but he would not have to get rezoning, and then have 1 additional house. So we were, in turn, we responded with flexibility, but we do not want to have the lot rezoned, and it is not simply out of fear. The basis for our concern is, well, first of all, we are in a deep recession, so who knows what's going to happen. And Mr. Jernigan, for all of his good intentions and his commitment to this property, may or may not be able to continue to carry out the plan as he contemplates now, at which point he would sell the property and the zoning would run with the land. We also have fairly good reason to believe that Mr. Jernigan in the past has had some projects that he's been unable to complete. So this is not simply fear-based. So where we are headed with this is, if he can do it with R1 zoning, we're fine with that. But we do not want to take on a property that is zoned R2 and then end up having not 4 houses, but 8 residences on a 1-acre lot. What that would mean in terms of the street, let me describe the street because it's very unusual. The street is a total of 700 feet long. Half of that fronts on the nursing home fronts on half of that. The remainder, as you go up a hill, which does provide a visual sort of change, is the remainder of that is, so 350 feet consists of Mr. Jernigan's lot and the 3 residences that I and my 2 neighbors own. So it's a short street. It's very short. It's close to an 1/8 of a mile. If that lot is built out to its full at R2, RN2 to a full 8 residences, you normally figure 2 cars per residence. That would lead to 16 cars, and parking would be a mess. Traveling up and down the street would be a mess. The Oak Grove Lane is a narrow street. It's a maximum of 16 feet wide. There are large trucks that go up and down it in order to get to the cemetery. So this is not simply 3 neighbors who are worried about whether this is going to be an attractive subdivision of that particular lot. It is our concern about how radical changes would occur to our street. I also would like to mention that that Oak Grove Lane is part of and has always been part of the Lions View community. And I hope that you all saw the letter that the president of the Lions View Community Club sent yesterday. I know it was sent to you, Mr. Roberto, and then I forwarded it on to you all today. Mr. Davis, Ron Davis, grew up in the neighborhood, in the Lions View community neighborhood. The neighborhood has tried
Mayor,
for.
I'm not sure if you're keeping time, but 5 minutes has elapsed.
Okay. It's
Yeah, Ms. English, could you, I think some people might have some questions for you, so.
All right,
maybe
so
if
let's
you
go to questions.
Take a pause and see if anyone has a question.
That sounds good.
Council members, any questions for Ms. English? Okay, Ms. English, I think they have the information they need from you. And I think they got the emails as well. Did everybody get the email she spoke about? Okay, Mr. Roberto.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got some questions for Director Green. The property in question here is less than an acre and is currently zoned RN1. And so what I wanted to ask you is, I guess in a theoretical sense, under existing zoning ordinance, can up to 4 single-family homes be permitted on a lot that would be a little less than an acre, as the minimum lot size is 10,000 square feet for each single-family home?
Theoretically, there would have to be access and public street access, and if a new street is required, there may not be the ability to get 4 lots from 40,000 square feet.
Okay. And then in the same sense, if you're instead of dealing with an RN2 zone, would it be up to 8 single-family homes permitted on the same size lot, or up to 4 duplexes?
Again, theoretically, but the big difference is with 4 lots, a joint public easement, which has fewer standards than a public street could be provided to provide access. With 6 or more lots, a public street is required, and that would take a 50-foot right of way out of that property. So it's very doubtful that 8 lots could be developed on a 40,000 square foot property.
But it could be maybe as many as 6.
Possibly 6, yes, sir.
Okay. In your experience, could Oak Grove Lane support the potential increased density permitted in RN2 in its current condition as to on-street parking or increased traffic?
In its current condition, it would be challenging, but part of the review process for any development of this property of the size we're speaking with the RN2 designation would require review by the City Department of Engineering. And that review would likely require upgrades to Oak Grove Lane in order to accommodate any traffic generated.
Well, considering that the RN1 would, at least in a theoretical sense, allow for the development that the developer's seeking here, I'm not in support of the rezoning. When you look at the totality of the situation here, the cohesiveness of this neighborhood, and the historic nature of this neighborhood, this is a historically African-American neighborhood that's really a very special place. I've really enjoyed going to neighborhood meetings there. And, you know, hopefully when we get past these points where we have to do Zoom meetings, I can resume doing that. You know, I think that this can be accomplished in RN1, so I'd make a motion to deny the RN2 zoning.
Motion made to deny. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Mr. Thomas.
Mayor, Mr. Jernigan was seeking recognition a minute ago. I don't know if council wants to call on him.
First, Ms. Testerman. Ms. Testerman, I can't, you gotta unmute. There you go.
All right. That's what I was going to ask, if Mr. Jernigan could come back and, you know, provide feedback to both what Councilman Roberto and Ms. English had to say.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity. And I have looked at, my engineers have looked at these very issues in trying to reach a compromise with Ms. English in some way to look at doing the property. The ability to do more, as I mentioned to you originally in the meeting that we had, I've looked at on schematically, if you laid out 8 townhomes and left and built a single family residence, tore down the house that was there. And we looked at what that would, the infrastructure that would be required to do that, the density of development that would entail. And so it becomes a situation, Councilman Roberto, where mathematically it becomes impossible to do something of that scale at that intensity on this piece of property and make the math work out. Where if you look at doing the 4 residential lots, and we look at a long-term asset value with a joint permanent easement, everything fits. We're able to design it so that it works on the property and meet all of the needs of what the goal of creating diversity of housing for people, because we do identify the population of people that will live in this neighborhood as people who can't afford to live in the houses which are immediately around there, but they want to have access. They want to have nice housing, single family detached housing, close to Lakeshore Park at a price that they can afford. And so we're able to accomplish that with these design standards. The issue of we don't physically have enough land to create the 3, it doesn't appear to have the ability to get more than 3 lots plus the infrastructure that we need on the size property that we have, or I would just do the 4 lots. If I had more land, then obviously we wouldn't be having this conversation. I need the R2 zoning to give the flexibility of design, and the concerns of greater intensity just don't play out with the way the mathematics of the development would go forward, as Mr. Green has talked about. I hope that is an answer to that question, because we looked at it very closely.
Ms. Testerman, did you have any other questions for Mr. Jernigan?
No, I mean, I think that's it. I know that Mr. Jernigan has been doing this for, several decades. And I guess just going through the emails that we received, it seemed like a lot of the neighbors were on board with, we're okay with the 4, we're not okay with the 8. And it just, I'm a little perplexed by that I feel like he's tried to meet with the neighbors and he's tried to explain to them exactly what he's taken their recommendations and moved from townhomes to single family. And so I feel like he's tried to comply with all of their wishes based on the emails we've gotten and the information that he's brought forth. So plus to keep in mind, it also has to go back to Planning Commission for approval. So I feel like he's trying to comply and spend a great deal of money to ensure that it's within the scale and the integrity of the neighborhood.
Ms. Fugit. And then I'll go to Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question because it's getting a little late and I'm getting a little confused about land zoning. So, am I hearing this correctly that R2 means there's no variance to do 4 lots, but if it stayed R1, someone could go to the Planning Commission and ask for a variance to do 4 houses?
Mr. Green?
Somebody answer that for me.
Director Green, could you answer that?
I'm trying. Okay, took a while to unmute, but the variance would be heard by the Board of Zoning Appeals, not the Planning Commission. And in order to receive a variance, a hardship has to be shown, and that hardship has to be something other than economic. So I can't project whether the Board of Zoning Appeals would grant a variance or not. The variance would have to be.
Thank you. You answered.
Develop 4 lots on the property is zoned now.
You answered my question. I was trying to figure out why we were going for R2, because if you stayed at R1, you have to get a hardship variance, which is what we dealt with the South Knoxville. I'm learning all my variances now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. Thank you, Ms. Fugit. Mr. Thomas.
Yeah, a comment, I suppose. It seems to me like the real true middle ground here is Mr. Jernigan has said that he can build 3 houses zoned as is. And that will be an increase of density in the neighborhood. So that's the main reason that I'm going to oppose the rezoning. Mr. Jernigan, I wanted to applaud him for his outreach to the neighbors. He's a very experienced developer. has done some good projects. But I guess my suggestion in this case would be keep the zoning as is, build within the zoning, and you will still have the 3 houses.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Any further comments or questions from council members? Ms. Testerman.
I'm just curious from Mr. Jernigan if he had already explored that option.
Mr. Jernigan, could you answer if you've explored that option?
We've looked at that option extensively. And one of the reasons that we waited for the rezoning, for the recode process to go into effect, and it was a purposeful waiting of the rezoning, was because the recode process and the city council and the planning commission spent 2 years talking about the ability to create greater housing diversity opportunities in every zone in Knoxville. We waited, and I brought the zoning forward after recode had been in place and had been discussed at 2 separate city council meetings, so that the goal of creating a diversity of housing, this is single family detached housing. It looks like most of the other houses that are developed in the neighborhood as far as the density of the property. The issue is that with the R2 zoning, we're allowed to get 4 lots with no need to request variances. I've talked to the neighbors that I am happy to look at. They've talked about, as Mary English said, talked about doing a duplex. We can look at, after I have the 4 lots where I have by right to build the houses, then I can go back and look at modifying the plan, and possibly maybe the mathematics works out and we can do a duplex. But the only way that we know we can really ensure a quality project to meet the guidelines of what the city of Knoxville needs as far as diversity of housing, the city of Knoxville does not need, and I'm just being to Mr. Thomas's point, I could have sold the property 48 hours after purchasing the property for somebody who wanted to come in, tear the house that's there now down, and build 3 $800,000 houses. The city of Knoxville, in my view, needs a diversity of housing, not 3 more McMansions built next to the Veterans Cemetery. I chose to retain the property. Instead of selling the property then, I've chosen to put a plan together that ensures the property will remain an asset for my family for decades to come. We've looked at these different options multiple times. And again, I ask you to give me the flexibility to design the project for 4 single-family homes in an R2 zone. We've shown the good faith effort that what we're going to do. I understand Councilman Roberto's issue for the neighborhood, which is the reason that when we stepped back and looked at it, we looked at the neighborhood. We've come forward with this design plan, and those who've known me for a long time know I am looking always for a way to keep the neighbors involved and design something that has great value into the future. And that's what we've done here. And I certainly understand the concerns of the neighbors, but we have done everything to do what the city of Knoxville has spent years in designing with the recode process. What came up in this very council meeting just a few minutes ago, that R2 is an acceptable low density zone for low density residential property. And you couldn't have a more perfect transitional piece than this one to transition from an R6 zone to the R1 zone. And again, I do appreciate very much the efforts that you all have taken to listen to this long rezoning at the end of a very long meeting. So I do ask you to support the R2 rezoning on this property. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jernigan. Any other questions or discussion? The motion on the floor is to deny this. Is that to deny the rezoning request?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it was made by Mr. Roberto and seconded by Mr. Thomas, I think. Are there any further questions or discussions on this motion? Does everyone understand what you're voting, what you're voting on? A yes vote is a vote to deny the rezoning. Okay. Mr. Johnson, please take a roll call vote.
Councilman Roberto?
Yes.
Councilwoman Singh?
No.
Councilman Smith?
Yes.
Councilwoman Testerman,
No.
Councilman Thomas, Councilman Thomas,
Yes.
Councilman Fugit,
No.
no. Vice Mayor McKenzie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Parker,
Yes.
Councilwoman Ryder.
Yes.
Okay, 6-3, the motion passes. Next agenda item, please.
We're at public forum, man.
Oh, great. How many people have signed up for public forum?
We have 2 people signed up. The first rather is Constance Every.
Okay, Miss Every, are you on the call? Are you part of the meeting? Okay, if you could unmute and then you have up to 5 minutes. Please start by stating your name and address for the record.
My name is Constance Every, 301 North Charlie Drive, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37914. Hello, council. It is quite the pleasure to be able to speak to you all as we go through these pandemic times. I've sat through the entire meeting and I have to commend some things. Amazingly, that last one, especially Victor Jonigan, is a crook. He is known for profiting off of poverty. And as a veteran, letting him build a property next door to our veterans cemetery will definitely be exactly the thing that he's trying to speak against, because he will definitely price gouge and do the same thing as the company that wanted to do in the first place. I'd rather deal with the honesty of the company that wanted to do in the first place than somebody's lying, saying that they won't do it. But moving on, I want to first start off by talking about the coronavirus response and how we have poorly been handling that. You know, I would love to sit there and let y'all congratulate yourselves and pat yourselves on the back, but let's be honest, y'all have not been on ground zero at all. I know that because myself and Next Step Initiative have been the ones on ground. I would still like to have a response from the police department in the matter of who told the police last week to go down there and destroy the homeless property. Because as me and Addie Parr both recognize that property that y'all destroyed was donated to us through the community, people who supported our causes and believed in us, and you all went down and destroyed that property. So that's like thousands of dollars of equipment and other things that cost the public money, like the tents do cost money, the sleeping bags cost money, the personal hygiene products cost money, the clothing costs money, the shoes cost money, and other like the non-perishable items cost money. So y'all destroy stuff that the community supported us with and destroy money. Somebody said it was okay because they said they used bulldozers. And if you have not actually seen the post from the message from a person from the homeless who told me the story, let me know because I can tag you to it because I shared it. Addition to the fact, there's no excuse to not have the homeless outside because we have a whole Easttown Mall we just closed that's boarded up. We could have made that into a emergency shelter and even put healthcare and other resources right there on the spot and quarantine and use the space to intake and output people that are healthy versus those who are ill. It's too big to not use that space. Or better yet, the convention center, that's public property that's in the city. You talk about the city and county versus things, but we have property right in the city that we could use easily. The issue still comes to the fact, tax dollars are still not being used appropriately. Additionally to the fact, y'all are still not doing what we as the public asked you to do as our representation. So it comes back to the main problem. As I told you before, coronavirus didn't cause homelessness. Coronavirus didn't cause poverty. Coronavirus didn't cause loss of income and other resources that we have been losing in our communities. It exploited it is what it did. And the fact that we have watched not only our local, state, and federal governments use this opportunity not to help people, but to exploit it even farther makes me disgustingly sick as a veteran. I cannot believe the things you have been doing. In addition to the fact, you want to give money to the big business. No, give it to the grassroots organizations on ground zero. You talk about us being a factor of spreading. No, we've been a factor of helping. You have done nothing, India Kincannon. Where's the food at for the homeless at? Where's the job resources that we're going to have for these people when they lost their jobs? Y'all talking about suspending pay? No, forgive pay, because people lost their jobs in this time. 72 hours after we lift this whole come outside ban, these people are going to be homeless and out in the street and evicted because they can't afford rent or the lights that was caused by the fact they lost their jobs in the first place. Knoxville do better. Y'all still failing us. Y'all still failing us and patting each other on the back for nothing. It's disgusting. I cannot take it anymore. That's why we are moving for political ranks and other things. People keep voting. We have campaigns still running. I heart Marquita Bradshaw out of Memphis wins the United States Senate seat. That gives us a senator on our team. I hope Matthew Park wins the 15th District Street. That gives us a state representative, as well as Elizabeth Rowland. I hope she wins too. I hope Kimberly Park and I hope Daisha Lundy win their race too. We have to build our own power structure and make you all do the right thing because we got to write our own legislation to make you do the right jobs. Y'all won't do it on your own. We have to force you. And Glenn Jacobs, what a joke. I should laugh at him all day. That's what you get for making a wrestler a politician. Good job, Knoxville. And in Kincannon, you are Madeline 2.5. I told people that from time and time again. You have continued to fail. It's funny now, but it won't be later. Keep laughing. Let the public see you laugh. This is not funny. I don't give a fuck about 60 minutes. I'm going to keep talking. Stop interrupting me because I have something to say. You have failed your public again and again and again. People are committing suicide. What's the answer for that? Oh, we don't have one. People are still committing drugs. What answer for that? Oh, we don't have one. But instead, you give the police power to get on the boat. We have a Coast Guard. The Coast Guard. We don't need police on the water. We got the United States Coast Guard here. We have the Navy Reserve right down the street as well as the Air Force and everybody else here. We don't need police on the water. Period. Disgusting. Do better. I don't have nothing else to say.
Okay, thank you. Next person for public forum.
Yes, Mayor, that'll be me, Mr. David Hayes. One moment.
Okay. Mr. Hayes, when you're unmuted, please state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to address the council. Go ahead.
Hello, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so David Hayes, address 1312 Hawthorne Avenue. I just want to share some more concerns in the community. First off, I do want to give some appreciation to the mayor and city for taking some action and taking some leadership in this moment. But obviously, as Constance said, there's still more that the city can do to step up. But also in contrast, it's unfortunate that the county mayor hasn't taken needed action. So if you haven't seen the urgency around resourcing and coordinating social services, and they have a larger budget than the city. So we need to see more, action from the county. So the folks in the community are concerned about the spread of the virus within the jails because of the poor practices that inmates are reporting. Just so folks know that most folks in jail haven't even been convicted yet, but regardless, everyone deserves to be safe. So we need to be depopulating our jail and not just adding a lot more folks to it. So right now, arrestees are saying that they have to sign guilty plea deals to get out. And if not, they have to stay in jail. So what's happening is unjust and counterproductive to public safety. Also, we wanted to echo what Councilwoman Parker said about resourcing grassroots NGOs and nonprofits, not just the ones who are established. So we need to grant money to folks on the front lines and make it accessible to folks on the front lines and connect to United Way and 211 and the Emergency Operations Center with folks on the front line so we can make sure that everybody is being reached with the resources that they need. Also want to say that the guest house for houseless folks, that's housing up to 18 houseless folks, is a good step, but still not enough to what we need to be doing during this crisis. Home healthcare workers, folks who are going in and out of homes, are lacking PPE right now. Folks think the city should take some leadership in that. There's concerns over enforcement, over executive orders and the state of emergency. So just want to say that we need to be maintaining public safety, but not, I repeat, not criminalizing communities and not limiting the essential movements of residents around the city. And right now, we're seeing that all public and essential workers deserve a living wage inside and outside of this crisis right now. So many city employees are risking their lives, going in and out of people's homes and touching all these things and around crowds and people. And it's not just KPD. So all city employees deserve great pay right now. And next, I want to highlight some things from the City Council movement's petition for demands for local government. I'm just going to highlight a few things. If you haven't seen it yet, it will be sent to you. Over 600 people have signed on to this petition. So some highlights are we want the city to actually guarantee paid sick leave to all city employees, not just the ones who qualify, but all city employees, and making sure that we're finding ways to incentivize private businesses to follow and do the same. We want to see no evictions during this crisis, and we're glad to see the moratorium on evictions by KCDC, but we need to see them forgive the payment so folks aren't just accruing more debt and payments right now when they can't even work. And same with KUB. We're glad they're not shutting people's power off and utilities off, but we need to see them forgiving these payments right now so folks aren't just bearing in debt. We need to see more preventative measures and sanitation products and free medical testing and free treatment for all houseless individuals. So this also backs up what Councilwoman Parker said before about the need for hand washing stations. So that's just a drop in the bucket as far as what's needed in our communities. And lastly, wanted to highlight the point of guaranteeing non-enforcement of warrants and immigration enforcement. So not enforcing warrants and immigration at homes, supermarkets, schools, traffic stops, healthcare sites, and other places where essential services are provided. So again, we don't need to be criminalizing folks. We need to be keeping folks safe. And the very last thing, I just want to say that poor and working class communities have been in a crisis before this pandemic. So folks are going to need even more support after this. So we're going to need to see more support going to housing and social services. And the last thing we need to do is implement austerity measures. So the more resources that the city can start looking to now to making sure that we can have people's back when this is all over and during this, the better. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. That concludes public forum. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Be safe out there, folks.